Chapter 16. The Chamber of Secrets. Chapter text. Lily took the book with high trepidation. She really was terrified of what she was about to read. Last time her son had found out something crucial about the school, he charged headfirst into danger. He had just discovered that moaning Myrtle might have been a victim. What if Myrtle told him something more? She had no doubts he would do the same thing again. She knew if Harry figured out where the chamber was, he very well might go down there and figure it out on his own. Throwing him a wayward look, all he could offer her was a wan smile, but it was enough. She smiled back and forced herself to read. Agreed, Sirius nodded. That's why it pays to talk to all the ghosts at some point or another. Do you not remember the cloak? James demanded. It will be difficult, sure, but not impossible. I didn't like using the cloak unless I absolutely had to, Harry disagreed. Didn't want anything to happen to it, or for a teacher to confiscate it. So I didn't want to risk it, not then anyways. James nodded in understanding. I guess without Hermione you forgot about them, Remus asked. Yeah, Harry agreed. Why wouldn't he think so? Lily asked. Yeah, the school has awful stuff happening to it all the time. I swear the teachers would still hold exams if there was just one student left, James agreed. Oh yeah, they've all got their noses to the books, I'm sure, Sirius snorted. All four of them gave Harry a wan smile, sorry to tell him that they had gone to school in much the same fearful conditions. Not necessarily with a monster running loose inside the school, but the monster running loose on the outside hadn't exactly made for the best environment. I'm sure that just made her day, Remus snorted. Oh, I'm sure you're just exaggerating, Lily grinned. You learn more in your classes than you think you do. Harry shrugged. His learning had been the last thing on his mind those past few weeks, so at the time he probably couldn't have come up with a first-year spell. Sounds like a lovely expression, James chuckled. Then all five of them winced, Lily saying, he really should go and ask for a new wand now. I'm sure his parents aren't still mad about the car thing, just tell them an accident happened. I'm very sure he doesn't, Harry said, shaking his head from side to side and wondering something. Something about Ron's wand, and a few days before exams. Did he learn something new? About the chamber his thoughts were cut off as Lily continued. I like all of those suggestions, Sirius chuckled. Harry made a choking noise and pressed his palm to his forehead, which the others did notice this time. Sadly, when asked, though, all he could say was, something happens on that day. Something about Ron's wand. But I can't remember, he finished in frustration, this time leaning back and forcing himself not to pry into his memories without prompting. The four of them exchanged very world-weary looks, knowing by now that if Harry had a memory this powerful, it was something significant. Whether good or bad couldn't be guessed. Hermione, they all said at once, Sirius adding on. Hopefully that's what you're trying to remember. I've no idea what Ron's wand would have to do with it, but I'm sure Hermione waking up is it. He finished with far more hope in his voice than he actually felt. Harry nodded, not feeling this answer was any more correct than Sirius. Hermione woke up, of that he was sure, but it wasn't what this feeling was. That gained a genuine burst of laughter from all of them, never having met her. Even the four adults could imagine the girl going crazy at that prospect. Wonder what's eating her? Remus asked. Lily rolled her eyes indulgently. It's not like any of them had a clue, so read. The humor was gone at once, as they all puzzled over this. Ginny was acting pretty scared, even after the good news that the victims were about to awaken. There was something bad happening inside of Harry right now. He had a sudden, overwhelming desire to grab hold of Ginny and keep her by his side for the rest of that year. His instincts were telling him something really bad was about to happen to her. Then it was gone again. He was left as befuddled and curious as the rest of them as his mom read. You think she figured something out? James asked curiously. Can't imagine what, Sirius shrugged, or why she'd be acting like this if so. She hasn't done anything wrong by figuring anything out. She might be nervous Ron's going to tell her she's being ridiculous and is nervous about being shot down, Remus offered. She's fixing to tell us anyways. Lily finally interrupted their speculating. Just let me read it. Great, now we have to start this all over, James huffed, growing more uneasy the longer this went on. What? They all yelped in genuine concern. Why would she tell one brother and not the other? Remus asked. Well, if you were right, Sirius offered, then she really wouldn't have wanted to get shot down by someone like Percy. I'll bet she looks up to him as the smart one or something. Still, Lily fretted, to run off like that, what on earth could be bothering her? You tell us, James reminded with a sly grin. Lily shot him a look that clearly said, "You're not funny," but read anyways. How does he know? James demanded. He didn't even let Ron finish. Percy needs a reality check, Lily agreed. No, Sirius yelped, looking genuinely upset. Not never mind. I want to hear what St. Percy's been up to. Honestly, Sirius, you wanted to know more gossip about the school than half the girls, Lily chuckled. Makes for good blackmail. He grinned cheekily at her before giving her a very obvious wink. Any ideas, then? Remus cut off before Lily could reply to that. I've got nothing, James shrugged. I really can't imagine Percy getting into much. Probably won't find out anyways, Sirius said, deflating, then frowning and saying, You think that's what Ginny was really going to say, Percy being up to something? Could be, James agreed. It would make her nervous about ratting out one brother to another anyways. Harry was frowning, knowing deep down this was not the thing Ginny had wanted to say, but having only the vaguest of feelings about this subject with Percy. As always, he had nothing to go on, so more frustrated with himself than anything, he said nothing. You know, for some odd reason, I don't believe him, Remus chuckled. Of course you wouldn't, Lily sighed. Don't even, James chided. You'd be just as involved in this as Harry. Lily couldn't deny that, she just wished her son wasn't. That was one of the most depressing sentences in this book, Remus frowned. Sirius snorted with mirth. Which no one was surprised about, I'm sure, Sirius laughed. Lily released an explosive breath as she said, While I agree it must be extremely hard on the teachers to have to escort students across the castle like that, honestly how they're pulling it off is a miracle, but it's far from hardly worth the trouble. Those students really do need to feel secure. I feel for the other teachers, Remus agreed, and I think Lockhart's official job should just be escorting all the students about. It's not like he's of any use in the classroom. Probably asleep in a nook, Sirius muttered. You think by now he'd realize he's been wrong every other time, Remus snapped, and he'd just shut up. That would imply a level of intelligence which he will never grasp, James disagreed. Twat, Sirius muttered. Lily almost did the same thing as she looked up and around at him in surprise, but at once the other three boys broke into wide grins, James praising, Well played, Harry. I don't get it, Lily said, sounding frustrated she had to admit this. What are you agreeing with him for? Harry wants to sneak away without adult supervision, Sirius explained, surprisingly without any mocking in his tone. Then again, Sirius was always willing to corrupt, so in his mind he was doing an important job in educating Lily of this concept. So, he's flattering this idiot. I'm positive that if Harry does it right, and I have every confidence he will, Lockhart will abandon them, and the rest of the class will go to history of magic without their escort. Leaving Harry and Ron a chance to sneak off to Myrtle's bathroom, Remus finished with a smug grin at Lily's astounded look. After looking around at all the boys for a moment more, she shook her head in fondness and said, Yes, well, I guess there's no harm in it. How would you have snuck in there then? James prompted, We all know you'd want to as well. She sat there appraising him for a moment before finally responding, Well, first off, since I am a girl it would make far more sense for me to be around. Also, I most likely would have done what none of you boys have even thought of doing. And what's that? Sirius asked, just a bit pompously. Finding it hard to believe Goody Two-Shoes Lily could come up with something he couldn't in the act of sneaking around the school. I tell a teacher why I was going, she informed him pleasantly, waiting one moment to grin at his shocked look and explaining, The teachers are there to help. If I had any kind of suspicion, like Myrtle might have some kind of answer to help, I would have gone to McGonagall. How did you find out this stuff then? James demanded. Would you honestly go in telling her you broke school rules to find this stuff out? Well, there's the main difference in us, Lily finally said. I might have looked into this like every other kid in the school, but I never would have dreamed of going to the lengths Harry had, or even you lot, I'm sure. So me finding this out is pure theoretical. To find out about Myrtle, I'd never have traveled into the forest, or even spoken to her like you seem to, so it's a moot point. Too true, Remus chuckled, none of them able to deny it. Lily shrugged as she made to move on. Idiotic jerk, Remus huffed under his breath. More like Fix's hair, Sirius snorted in disgust. Sirius blinked a few times before laughing, not regretting having mimicked Ron at all. Damn, James winced. There's that bad luck we were missing. Which teacher was it? Sirius asked anxiously. At least it wasn't Snape, Remus sighed. Can only imagine what you're going to tell her, though, James said wearily. Stuttering is not helping your case, Sirius said as if Ron was here listening. He panicked, Harry defended. And what were you doing? James asked curiously. Before Harry could answer, Lily read. Oh, Lily cooed. Lily, you know that's not true, James laughed. Yes, but it was still sweet, that's what came out. Lily grinned down at her son, the boy not really understanding that look. Of course he would have gone to see his friend as often as he could if they had been allowed in the hospital wing. This also wasn't the first time he'd seen that look, but Lily was already going on before he had a chance to ask. Subtle, Remus chuckled. I'm sure Ron's staring at you made that plenty believable. That was always a surefire way to get out of trouble with her, Sirius grinned. Tell her we were sneaking up to see Remus in the hospital wing. Granted, it didn't always work, James chuckled, but since this is the first time Harry said that, I think she just might let you get away with it this time. Very curious now, Lily read. Oh, Lily beamed. Wow, she never cried when we said that, James said in surprise. Yes, well, I think she got sick of hearing it after the 5th time, Sirius snorted. Yes, Remus cried, bouncing with joy. You're all far too okay with Harry lying to a teacher, Lily told them, unable to keep a smile off her face as well. Even she couldn't deny Harry wasn't doing anything too wrong right here. I swear, Evans, you want your son to be a saint, Sirius snarked. Potter, James corrected with a frown, causing everyone else to laugh. Harry frowned thoughtfully, knowing without having to ask that Sirius had just called his mom by her maiden name. Perhaps it had been her nickname in school. Favorite teacher, James grinned. She really is an old softy, Sirius agreed. So they can't hear us or anything, Harry asked sadly. Well, I've never known anyone to be petrified by a basilisk, Lily frowned, but the experience of being frozen is simply going cold all over and then blacking out until you're revived. I imagine it's the same thing here. James couldn't help a snort of mirth at that mental image. Thankfully, that's not how it works. Otherwise, this would have been a lot worse, Remus shrugged. All 5 exchanged very curious looks as Sirius said. They said she was found outside the library, which is where she was heading. Was she leaving the library? Are you saying Hermione ripped up a book? James snorted. I doubt that. Most likely, she found whatever she had gone there for and copied the actual page, Remus added. I love it when we're right, James grinned. Probably because it happens too rarely, Lily told him pleasantly. James frowned at her but ignored the jab. So that's what she figured out, Remus grinned. Congrats, you got there before her, Sirius laughed. While I'm happy Harry's going to have his answer in the book, it still doesn't explain any of my other questions, James huffed. How's it getting around, and more importantly, who's controlling it? And what's its connection to Harry? Lily reminded. I still don't really buy the coincidence that Harry's either known every victim or found them. I don't appreciate that reminder, James informed her, but I agree that needs to be an answer soon. Still can't figure out how you got a basilisk out of that info, Sirius told Remus. He shrugged and said, all the clues from the last sentence were there. I was just stumped by its petrification. Then as more victims kept cropping up, lucky guess, he finally trailed off. Oh, give yourself some credit, James snorted. We never would have guessed that they were seeing reflections of its eyes. They all churned that over in their mind as Sirius said, but the pipes aren't exactly big enough to hold a huge snake. Well, maybe the pipes are as magical as the rest of the school, Lily offered, puzzling it aloud. Plenty of things in the castle magically expand to compensate for what's passing through it. Makes sense, I suppose. But that doesn't explain, how's it getting out of the pipes? James asked. Coming out of the toilets. Again, would it even fit? They all felt rather stumped and wondered if Hermione even had the right answer to that, but they also acknowledged they didn't have any better kind of answer. You got there quick, Remus approved. Once it was all laid out like that, it was like a giant puzzle just clicked together, Harry grinned. Ron couldn't make that one on his own. Sirius demanded. He was there for that one. So he doesn't remember every detail, leave him be, Lily shot back. I don't know, it's a theory I guess, Sirius shrugged. More than we had, Remus agreed. Harry's eyes lit up like Christmas as he said, yes, that was it. I knew there was something about Myrtle I didn't remember. He looked around at all of them to see faces that were nearly as frozen as Hermione's had been. Oh, guys, Harry asked cautiously. We are idiots, James broke first, running his hand through his hair in agitation. How did I not put that together? Sirius demanded of himself. We were even joking earlier about how Myrtle haunts bathrooms and died in a bathroom. Well, Harry began before pressing on. I mean, it was a wild guess. Ron just guessed right, he finished while giving Remus an obvious look. They were all still huffing and grumbling that they hadn't figured this out, but really what more could they say? At least we got that part, Lily muttered. Yes, the four of them said at once, giving Harry a very suspicious look, James adding, Why would you do anything else? Harry just shrugged, fighting something that was trying to crop up in his mind. He had thought something important happened today, but he'd thought it had to do with Ginny. Had he been wrong, and it was Hermione who had done something significant today? By now, though, he knew better than to pry into those memories to make sense of them. In answer to their question, he just shrugged. Oh no, Remus groaned. Not another attack, Lily said, biting at her lip. They're not going to listen to you now, Sirius huffed. They're just going to ship you off to the dormitory without hearing a word. Well then, they'll just have to try again tomorrow, when it's a bit calmer. James said forcefully, pointedly ignoring the look Harry was giving him. James was lying to himself. That look meant what he said wasn't going to happen, and he was growing rather weary of it. Still, his verbal hopes were better than his mental images of his son going down and trying to find some psycho who had control of a giant man eating snake. Granted, Harry was more in danger from the person than the beast, but it was far from a pleasant thing to be thinking. Harry couldn't help it. He was clenching up and feeling the urge to vomit as he tried to stem off his memories. Something bad is about to happen, his mind kept screaming, but he knew if he found out now it would cost him dearly, and the pain he was feeling now would be nothing. So taking long, deep breaths, he tried his hardest to ignore his now impending sense of doom. Really? Remus asked, sounding almost half hysterical. He too had been trying his hardest not to picture Harry and Ron deciding to take it upon themselves again and go down into the chamber. You're going to spy on the teachers, in their coat closet. Points for originality, Sirius said weakly. Lily felt as if she were suddenly speaking through numb lips. Her vision tunneled, and the book nearly fell out of her grip. Glancing up, she saw Harry in much the same shape. The air in the room seemed to freeze over, and no one wanted to ask. Lily had the sudden desire to toss the book away from her so that she herself wouldn't have to find out, because she didn't want to know the answer. It didn't matter if she, by that meaning Harry, knew of this student or not. Whoever it was, she genuinely did not want to hear about it. Yet she had the book, and Harry's tortured expression as he tried to stave away the memories was so much worse than anything she herself would feel just by finding out. So she pushed forward. James blinked suddenly in surprise, though he was sure he was the only one who did. Surprisingly, even Lily was still more intent on finding out which student had really died this time than such a random detail as this. All five of them shivered, hating that message and the mental image it provided, hating this monster for existing, hating this air above all others for causing all of this. Harry released a breath he'd been holding since McGonagall had stepped into that room. Unbidden tears began stinging at the corner of his eyes. Emotions so powerful there was no way he had been feeling them at 12 years old, because he hadn't known Ginny that well then, had rarely even thought of her. Just Ron's little sister. What he was feeling in this moment was as if something had reached in and torn out his heart and was trampling all over it. Why, though? Of course he liked Ginny, but what had happened from his second year to now that made him feel as if someone he couldn't live without had been taken away? Was it possible? Could Ginny really still be alive? And he got to know her after this year. Questions and emotions were pounding through him with such intensity it took him far too long to realize the others were trying very hard to get his attention. It took a very sharp slap to the face for his vision to finally blur back into focus, and for a moment he had the odd impression of looking into a mirror before the other features registered, and his dad was apologizing and trying to explain, but Harry was still looking back to the book as if it had just told him his firstborn child had died. Harry! His mom's voice finally sunk into the void, and he took about as long to focus back on her. As soon as he recognized who it was, his eyes automatically began straying towards the books, but then his mother continued speaking, taking those precious seconds to get completely through to him. need to focus on the here and now. Whatever you're trying to block out, it will help if you focus on us." He shook his head from side to side, hard enough that his glasses nearly flew off as he finally responded, "That's not right. Ginny's not dead. But she's in trouble, or something really bad is happening. I think—" He made to get up from the couch and head to the kitchen, but a very hard hand was suddenly on his shoulder and seemed determined to keep him in place so that his dad was once again in his space and saying, "Ginny's not here, son. Whatever you're remembering, she's not here right now. You need to make sure you're not prying too far ahead." "Sounds like really far ahead," a ghost's voice offered. Harry's head jerked back around to the rest of the room, his eyes landing on the speaker, serious. His eyes widened with recognition, and for a moment confusion, before finally they all saw at once as his conscience settled down once more to the here and now. He was still glancing back and forth to the kitchen and the book, but it was clear he no longer had the same mindset he'd had. After that disaster, she was almost afraid to ask, but in the same way she had hoped continuing to read would help, she hoped their continuing to talk to him would ease whatever lingering unease he was still carrying, so she asked, "Harry dear, what was that? It wasn't like anything that's happened to you yet." Harry was biting at his lip, but he was settling back now and answered in a much more intelligible voice, I don't know. It wasn't like before, where I was just trying to remember what happened later in this book, where I remembered it wasn't Snape. It was like I wasn't even here, that something else was happening, and I had to help." He broke off in frustration and gave one more frustrated look back at the place he had appeared, but then slumped back in defeat. "But it's gone now." Realizing the danger had passed, Remus and Sirius finally backed away from the couch back to their place. Once settled, Remus offered, "It seems your memories were trying to advance you to what was going on before you arrived here. It clearly didn't have the same side effect as accessing your memories like you were trying to on purpose. This seems more like a reflex. The book made your body react to something else completely different." Harry nodded, trying to follow this, but his head was still pounding furiously. He was right, though. Harry felt twitchy all over, like he should be springing into action, and the thought of Ginny dying had caused this, which meant that somewhere in his time had something happened to Ginny, something to cause him to react so violently. He tried to explain all of this, even the stuff about how he was so sure his feelings for Ginny were more than just Ron's little sister, but no one really had any more answers than he did. Sighing in frustration, but accepting he could do nothing for now, he turned to his mother and politely asked her to continue. Lily felt weary now, not ever wanting to see her son reacting like that again. It had been scary, her boy reaching for his wand, a look of furious rage on his features, but when James had slapped him, his features had gone to that of confusion. Her husband had clearly shocked her boy out of whatever he was trying to remember, and she was worried if Harry heard any more about this he would relapse. What choice did she have, though? She could hardly stop here. No, they would just have to do what they had always done from the moment she'd conceived, look after their boy and help when they could. Sucking in one more breath to steady herself, she read. "A very appropriate reaction," Sirius said wearily, still eyeing Harry like at any second he was going to leap up and really attack something this time. "I like his reaction better than mine," Harry muttered, crossing his arms and still frustrated with himself. He had no idea his body had been reacting in such a violent way. All he had been aware of was the emotions. "What?" Remus yelped in shock, but he broke off when he realized he could say nothing to the contrary. In record, no student had ever died at this school, let alone in this manner. Myrtle, his mind reminded him. Then he added on that most likely the school hadn't been closed then because Riddle had framed Hagrid. Having been given a culprit, the school had clearly felt safe enough to continue. "Oh, Harry, no," he moaned, giving his little cub a tragic look. Harry didn't bother to deny what he was sure they were all thinking, because he was thinking the exact same thing as well. Finally, his entire body had settled. His calm mother's voice had greatly helped with this, and he was back to relying on his gut for answers to this story. Two things now stood out clearly. Ginny wasn't dead. He had no doubts about this, in this book anyways, and he was going to go and rescue her. He and Ron were going to go into the chamber and confront the heir of Slytherin. While his 12-year-old self was still stuck on the fact that he thought Ginny was dead, Harry now knew better, and he had worked out what he knew without a doubt he would do. Not go back to living full-time with the Dursleys, and if there was a barest chance she had been alive, he would have leveled the castle itself to find her, even then. Having already come to those conclusions back when Harry and Ron had discovered where the chamber was, James gently told Lily to keep going this time, might as well get it over with. And I thought this day couldn't get any worse, Sirius muttered. Wouldn't surprise me one bit, Remus sniffed. He comes flaunting in there after that kind of news. To curse him, I hope, James muttered under his breath. Wait, what? The four boys started in confusion, but Lily had a vindictive smile on her face. She had a feeling she knew where he was going with this, so pushed on eagerly. Oh, I'm sure he did, Sirius said, brightening up at once as he caught on. Wow, somehow, unbelievably, I have actually liked Snape in this book more than I've hated him, James said, sounding more confused than anything. Guess it's 'cause we've found someone to hate equally, Remus chuckled darkly, if not a bit more. I'll take that for what it is, Lily giggled slightly. Right, sure he has, James snorted. And gave plenty of extraordinarily uselessly vague hints as well, Remus agreed in a sing-song voice. I've got to agree with James on this one, Sirius grinned vindictively. He's certainly been more tolerable in this book if he keeps bashing Lockhart like this. That's the joy of this, Lily beamed. They understand everything far better than you. I'd bawl my eyes out if they did, Remus snorted in disgust. Ha! Harry huffed under his breath, remembering this vividly. For the last time, hopefully, Sirius grumbled. Harry shuddered again, knowing deep down that Hogwarts didn't really close, but still unable to stand the very idea almost as much as the image of Ginny. He cut his mind off quickly, forcing his ears to focus in on his mom instead of treading back that way. Since none of the four of them wanted to believe the closing of that school any more than Harry, no one interrupted with speculation. An owl, James said, looking faint. Surely the teachers have told them something long before that owl. Besides, how would you even write that? I'm sure you were right the first time, Lily said patiently, and the teachers informed them already. Must be, Remus nodded, a steely look coming over his face as he tried to allow himself to begin questioning this, now that it was clear Harry seemed back to normal, at least for now. She was a pureblood, so this isn't anything to do with its normal target. No, Ron must be right, and she saw or figured out something, and possibly told the wrong person, or got caught by the air themselves. I'm honestly kind of curious how they even knew it was Ginny right off the bat, Sirius said slowly, still giving Harry cautious glances to make sure he didn't freak out again. There wasn't a head count. All the students weren't even in the dorms when this happened. It was in the middle of lessons, Remus agreed. So I would have thought McGonagall would be in a class as well. There's no way all the students were counted, and they realized Ginny was missing from every girl who could have just not been where they were supposed to be. Maybe McGonagall hadn't said the message verbatim, James offered as he turned it all over in his head. After all, she had to be prompted to tell which student it was missing. Maybe the message said it, and McGonagall just hadn't been able to say it yet. She may have come across it while leading a student to the bathroom in the middle of class or something. Whether the other two boys agreed with him or had something else to offer, Lily interrupted with, "Can we not?" She was shooting furtive looks at Harry, who seemed all right again, maybe a little paler and fidgety than normal, but she still didn't want to linger on this subject. Just let me read. I really don't think I can stand speculating. Harry seems confident he figures it all out in the end. Harry nodded silently at his mother's words, and Remus clipped his mouth shut in resignation. Talking helped him think, but it clearly wasn't helping anyone else right now. Harry nodded, not enjoying these feelings and memories returning one bit. Harry released a frustrated breath. She was alive, he knew it, but how? His mind was the blank and empty space it had been before. He had no more answers to comfort himself now than he did for his best friend then. Wait, what? James yelped. You must be joking, Lily, Remus demanded. Hell, I wouldn't have said anything if he'd said Snape just then, but him. Harry just shrugged and said, We were afraid if we went to McGonagall or any other teacher, we'd just be told to go back to the common room and that we were being ridiculous like last year. At least Lockhart would give us a chance and listen to our ideas. All four of them blanched, but deep down recognized they couldn't deny this. Last year, when Harry and his friends had been right and gone for help at the height of danger, no one had raised a hand, and so they had clearly come to that same conclusion this year. It was yet another harsh reminder that this world was a one without them, for they knew without a doubt if any of them had been there for their boy, he would have known he could turn to them for help. Agreeing with the boy's logic, Lily just decided to keep reading and hoping Lockhart might offer something useful before her son decided this teacher was of no more help than any other, and heading down into the chamber itself. Can't blame them one bit, Sirius nodded. Is he making a run for it? Remus asked, sounding mostly confused. James released a suffering sigh as he said, Can't say I'm surprised. Wasn't a secret he was a fraud, so when finally put in the face of danger, he bolts. Sirius called him a couple of colorful words before saying in more sane tones, Still the most useless bugger to ever enter this castle. Who the bloody hell runs away at a moment like this? Someone who doesn't even know how to control pixies, Lily muttered, before beginning to read again loudly so no one could continue this pointless verbal barrage. Is that what he's going with? Remus demanded, a rather nasty sneer beginning to flicker across his face. Of all the crummy teachers the school had been reduced to because of this stupid curse, this useless lump was the most insulting. Honestly, if he sat there and weighed them, Quirrell was worse, but this guy was hardly any better. Any of the teachers in that school would do more good than that idiot, James scoffed. I think they should all just pull together and share the job. That could be interesting, Sirius agreed. And probably not going to happen, Lily sighed. My poor boy, Lily said sadly. I thought you worked out he made all of that stuff up. I was mad, Harry huffed, and I thought there must be some truth to it, all the details and such. His imagination must have filled in the blanks from whatever sources he got those few facts from, Sirius huffed. Lily's brows shot into her hairline as she finished that sentence, before looking up and around and seeing the others looking just as confused as her. Ah, what exactly does that mean? Remus asked, cautiously at first. While he hated this lying buffoon, what he had just implied was something he would never have suspected, even of someone like Lockhart. Lily swallowed hard before continuing. Okay, James drew the word out far past its normal syllable count in surprise. Glad to see we're on the same page. Yes, but I'm sure he's at least crediting them, Sirius said half-heartedly. I mean, come on, use them as a reference or something. There's no way he could go around boasting these kinds of things, and those people wouldn't have said anything. Sirius didn't sound too sure of this, any more than the others looked convinced. He what? All five of them nearly screeched. But how Remus spluttered. There's no way, Sirius shook his head frantically. No way possible he could have absolutely pulled this off. Sadly, after his crummy actions this year, I do believe he did this. What I'm stuck on is, what about those people's families? Hell, what about the rest of the village who would have known someone else did these things? He couldn't possibly go around changing every single person's memories. Someone would notice. This is ridiculous, it really is, James said, shaking his head from side to side. How could you even enchant all those people? Merlin, I'm still stuck on how the bloody populace didn't figure all this out. Remus and Lily were giving each other furtive looks, finally Lily saying, Well, I can think of one way. It's ghastly and not exactly foolproof, but well, come on then, Sirius huffed, still eyeing the book with utter disdain. I'm wondering if he didn't enchant those books he published, she said hesitantly, as if waiting for someone to tell her she was crazy. After a beat of silence, James released a huge breath and said, No, I can see that. You're right, Lily, it's not foolproof. Someone somewhere should have noticed. But I guess that one person wouldn't have been able to make themselves heard, especially if he's using a quarter of the spells I'm thinking of. What spells? Harry finally butted in, wanting a few details of what they were talking about. Remus answered. He could have done a few things. A compulsion charm, so that when you see his book you're curious enough to pick it up. Perhaps even a slight altering of a memory charm on the book, so that while you're reading it you wouldn't think to question any of the ridiculous details we've heard. My guess would be he gave these towns and villages first-hand copies so that the immediate people responsible for this wouldn't have questioned this. How on earth could he get away with that? Harry demanded, going a little wide-eyed. That's a good question, Sirius acknowledged. Books sold in the wizarding world go through rigorous testing of this nature, so that this very thing can't happen. How Lockhart slipped through and managed to pull this stunt off is beyond us. How come Ron and I weren't affected? Or the teachers, for that matter, he pondered. We were around those books all year and never had the inclination to read them. Magic isn't universal, James pointed out. Not every spell affects every person in the exact same way. Especially charms, Lily added on. They're the most finicky type of magic. James nodded before continuing. What I'd really like to know is if anyone has looked into this. We know for a fact the teachers haven't fallen into this, let alone Dumbledore. Maybe they couldn't prove anything, Sirius offered. After all, how would you be able to trace this back to its source, unless Lockhart himself told you? Everyone in those towns would be totally convinced Lockhart did it, depending on the time frame of his publishing the books and the actual event. This is disgusting, Lily grumbled. I can't believe someone got away with this. Well, now they can't, Remus said. We know what he's done, and he hasn't done it yet. So we'll keep an eye on Lockhart as he grows up. Personally, I've been wanting to visit this little Armenian village myself anyways, especially now that I know Lockhart must have been exaggerating the details of how he defeated that werewolf. All of them nodded in conviction, more than determined to fix this magical catastrophe. Probably the only spell he can successfully pull off, Remus muttered, unable to believe his hatred for this man had actually increased. You poor dear, Sirius sneered. Let me get you a drink so you can whine some more. James, however, was frowning, suddenly giving both the book and Harry very concerned looks as he said, Ah, Harry, why is he telling you all this? Harry didn't understand at first, but the others caught on at once, Lily saying, Oh, come on, James, don't be ridiculous. But she didn't sound any kind of convinced. What? Harry asked, looking around at them. Harry, why would he go about telling you this? He must know you go and tell someone what he just told you. Even he can't be that dumb, Remus said, his hands starting to fidget around in agitation. Harry frowned a moment more before going wide-eyed and saying, Oh. His brow furrowed as he tried to puzzle out what happened, but then he shrugged and said, You don't think he's the one who erased my memory and somehow sent me here, do you? Even as he said the words, he could feel how wrong they were. That made them all take a step back. They hadn't really been thinking that far ahead, but then Sirius shook his head and said, No, you were 12 when this happened. You're a hell of a lot older now. You can obviously retain memories you've relirend, so we were thinking he must have just erased the one memory of him telling you this. Harry didn't think Sirius was any more right than him, but with nothing more to add on, he let his mother keep going. All 5 of them tensed up, the 4 adults feeling like drawing their own wands. Even having seen this coming, the very idea of anyone pointing a wand at their boy for any reason, especially one so wrong as to cover this bloke's ass for telling this himself, made their hackles raise. Lily had to remind herself firmly in that moment that Lockhart was still just a school student, and it would be wrong to go and kill him now. Harry looked rather frustrated, more so even then when this had happened to him. With his memories already having been taken away, he didn't appreciate the idea one bit of anyone else tampering with his mind. "Atta boy," they all crowed. "You've got some great reflexes, kid," Sirius praised, cursing him when he even had his wand out first. "It's inherited," James grinned, ruffling up his son's hair. "Ha!" Lily huffed under her breath, appreciating the irony that this was the second time his own wand had been thrown out the window by someone else. "Well, that was enlightening," Lily grinned at Harry. "But I must ask, what do you plan to do with him now?" While the others might have been distracted by the revelation of Lockhart's true colors, she was still stuck on what had driven the boys there in the first place. "You're not going to like the answer," Harry told them, his grin fading slightly. That made the others frown in concern, Remus saying, "So, I'm guessing this didn't deter you from going into the chamber then?" Harry's silence was all the answer they needed. Feeling a mounting sense of dread, Lily felt like she was reading her own doom. Her little hair bare going into the arms of something that had managed to scare every other teacher and student in this school. "Just tie him up and go get McGonagall," James offered weakly. "Tell her what he told you. I'm sure she'll make a proper inquiry." Harry didn't even deign that with an answer. They all knew his earlier reason for avoiding the other teachers still applied. Hell, a teacher had basically just tried to attack them. It was honestly no surprise Harry felt he had to take care of this matter on his own. It's not as if he really had anyone else. "Well, that's a fun idea anyways," James chuckled darkly. "Push him in first to see what happens." Harry released a snort of mirth, having a funny feeling his dad was right on the mark with that one. "Ghosts always appreciate any kind of attention," Remus agreed absent-mindedly, still pondering the details of the chamber being around Myrtle's bathroom. How had no one ever found it in there? How come Myrtle herself didn't know and told someone? Surely she would have seen the giant snake making appearances inside her bathroom and told someone. Why hadn't they themselves worked out it was a basilisk in their younger years because of the way Myrtle described her death? Great big yellow eyes. Why would a ghost exaggerate that? It took a very sharp poke from Sirius for Remus to drag himself out of his endless supply of questions and to realize he had been so far phased out. Can't blame yourself too much, Mooney, James said bracingly. None of us figured this out either. We didn't have the same clues as Harry did at his age. Yes, but we did now, Lily argued, rather frustrated with this mess herself, and Harry still worked out where the chamber was before us. Like I said, Harry tried again. It was more a lucky guess than anything. It was the pipes thing that made me think of it. It was the fact that Myrtle died in the bathroom, and the pipes clue Hermione had just left us. He trailed off with a sheepish shrug. Lily and Remus acknowledged they'd just have to let the matter go. The two of them never would have guessed such a thing, but James and Sirius were nodding along like this made perfect sense to them. Remus chuckled slightly as he acknowledged one of the great things about their little group, and the world in general, was that no two people thought the same. It takes combined efforts of different mindsets to make anything happen. Example, the Marauders and their fantastic pranking. Harry, Ron, and Hermione together seemed more than capable of dealing with issues in this school that the teachers and headmaster himself either couldn't or wouldn't. That was her name, Sirius muttered to himself under his breath, that random detail having bothered him when he couldn't remember it earlier. That's almost per word what she told us, James remembered. We had been so sure she was exaggerating the yellow eyes bit, Sirius snorted, and just didn't want to admit she'd done something stupid. Like what? Lily snorted. Why would she even make something like that up? Ghosts do it all the time, Remus shrugged. They love exaggerating the details of their death, making it more dramatic. The three boys rolled their eyes, beyond frustrated they'd never thought to ask that question themselves. Perhaps if they had, they'd have discovered the chamber same as Harry. That's it, Sirius scoffed. The entrance really was in a girls' loo. How on earth did Slytherin come up with that? Well, the school isn't exactly the same as when it first came into construction, Lily offered. At the perplexed look all the boys gave her, she grinned and explained. Well, the school was much smaller back then. Only 3 stories high or something, but as more students began coming, they kept adding more to the building itself. It would often magically expand itself to make accommodations for the inflating student population, and some days the rooms themselves would transfigure to adjust accordingly. It took all 4 of the original founders working deeply complex magic into the stones of the school for these charms to still be in effect to this day. So you're saying that, when Slytherin built this, it really could have just been an empty classroom or a closet? Remus asked. Or even his own private office, Lily agreed. I love that you know all that, James told her, giving her a bright-eyed look. Lily just grinned back, taking the compliment in stride. That would make sense, Remus nodded. Only a Parseltongue could get in. Didn't one of the students suggest that earlier? Yeah, Sirius said in remembrance. It was either that Finnegan kid or Thomas, one of them in Harry's year. He said something like only Slytherin's true heir could open it. Since Parselmouths, or most of them, he quickly corrected, giving Harry a smile, only inherit the ability through the bloodline. He was basically right. I think they both said something to the same effect, James offered. Well, you can go back and check later if you really want to, Lily snorted in amusement. That is so cool, Remus said, genuinely fascinated by this phenomena. Perhaps with practice you really could simply say it whenever you chose. Harry shrugged, still more perturbed than anything he could speak a language he didn't even know. All 5 of them released a shaky breath. Harry had already said what he was going to do, but the act of doing it was still almost too awful to consider. While Harry wasn't in too much danger from the basilisk if he could control it, still an untested theory, so they weren't even 100% behind this. The idea that the true heir, the one who had been going around trying to kill students this year, could be down there even now with Ginny wasn't any kind of comforting. Still, the 4 of them recognized it would do them no good to point this out to Harry now, so they remained silent and let Lily keep reading. Harry nodded with a conviction that was just as strong now as it had been then. Sirius released a bark-like laughter, more than pleased James' dark little joke had come true. Make me feel a little better for trying to curse them, James said pleasantly. You were supposed to wait a few moments to make sure you didn't hear screaming, Remus told him seriously. Harry just shrugged. He made Lockhart go down first more out of vindictive pleasure, kind of like his dad, he realized. But he wouldn't hesitate any more than he could afford if Ginny was down there. I am so jealous we never found this, Sirius said, and Lily was stunned to hear he really meant it. This isn't even on the map, ouch. He cut himself off, glaring at James, who had chucked a pillow at him to shut him up. What map? Harry asked curiously, before Lily could snap at Sirius for how stupid he was being. James gave Sirius the stank eye before saying, We, and he paused to gesture at the other two boys, made a map of the school once. I was going to tell you about it when I figured out what had happened to it. Harry very dearly wanted to remember something all of a sudden, but the thought disappeared at once. Lily still looked like she wanted to tell Sirius he was being an idiot, but James was giving her a very obvious, please keep reading, look, so she acquiesced for now. I've just thought of something, Sirius said, frowning now. Ron still doesn't have a proper wand. The others frowned, looking truly upset by this now. Perhaps, instead of chucking it out the window, Ron should have just kept Lockhart's, Remus said, realizing already there was no good pointing this out now. It wouldn't work as good as his own, but it's better than one that backfires. Harry suddenly had a very funny feeling, the same one in fact he'd had back at the beginning of the year. For some odd reason, he was very grateful for Ron's messed-up wand. He tried explaining this odd feeling to the others, but none of them had any real idea why this could be. Pleasant, Lily murmured, wrinkling her nose in distaste. They all shuddered at this, Harry hardest of all. Oh no, James groaned. He had been hoping for some inexplicable reason that Harry and Ron would simply find Ginny curled up in a corner, grab her, and get out of there without any kind of confrontation. Why on earth were these books determined to throw his son into the worst possible outcomes? Lily didn't give anyone else the chance to comment, reading almost feverishly. Empty, Sirius breathed with relief. It's just molted, Remus agreed. Gross, Lily said, but hopefully that's the only part of the snake they come across. James was rubbing his heart and looking at the book with trepidation, noting Harry's look that very clearly disagreed with Lily's statement. Remus made a choking noise of disgust. Of all the useless people to be with Harry right then, the injustice that it wasn't his own parents, or even he or Sirius, but this useless twat stung deeper than he was expecting in that moment. He what? Sirius snarled. I hope when you find Ginny, you leave Lockhart in her place, James snarled. That was a little dark, Harry said, frowning at his dad, though they all noticed there wasn't any real heat behind the words. Harry probably thought his dad was just kidding. He deserves it for what he's trying to do, James grumbled, not looking very repentant. Then his face brightened. He looked as if Christmas had just come early. What's that face, then? Remus asked eagerly. Lockhart's got Ron's broken wand, he explained, now full-blown grinning, and if my guess is correct, he's going to try and erase their memories again, come up with some cock and bull story, which won't work out too well. When the wand backfires, Sirius finished with relish. Welp, guess now we know why you appreciated that broken wand so much, Lily snickered. She looked not quite eager, but perhaps less like reading her own death as she went to find out what really happened. Remus looked dearly like he wanted to point out every flaw in that awful story, but Lily wasn't giving him the chance. She was more infuriated than anything that once again someone was pointing a wand in her son's face, aiming to harm. Damn, Sirius let out a low, throaty whistle. I'm guessing the wand really did explode that time. I think someone explained it later or something, Harry said, unable to properly recall the memory now. But yeah, I think you're right. Well, that's something to look forward to, James said bracingly. Oh, crap, is Ron okay? James all but yelled. Lily wasn't even going to wait for Harry to strain himself for an answer. She had already glanced down the page while James was yelling and soothed Harry by saying. They all released a breath of relief this time, not wanting Ron hurt again like he had last year, this time possibly worse. Far kinder than I would have been, Sirius huffed. Very glad you didn't try it then, Remus said, frowning deeply in concern as he tried to work out a proper way to do this. Lily dearly wanted to pause just so she could bite at her lip. She didn't want Harry to have to go in alone and face this threat by himself. Of course, that was implying she wanted Ron to go with him and possibly endanger himself as well. Then she forced herself to go on. no sense in dreading on it now. I'm glad you didn't finish that sentence, Sirius muttered, "'cause I didn't want to hear the end of it." "How'd that work out for you?" James asked weakly. "I'm going to guess not very well," Harry said, trying to force a smile onto his face now. "What's the point of that?" Sirius grumbled under his breath, not really expecting an answer. Someone already had to do that once to get down. Was the next door really necessary? As predicted, Lily just ignored him. "That's the end of the chapter," Lily said. Almost in relief as much as dread, she passed the book along to James. "This chapter, more than any other, blew my mind in the whole series. I understand the logic, cruel as it is, in Lockhart erasing those poor people's memories so that he could take credit for it. But what about the other people? The village that this warlock supposedly saved, they never raised protest that Lockhart wasn't the one who saved them. What about the families of these poor people? Lockhart couldn't have possibly changed and erased memories of every instance of those books. What on earth did he do to make it so no one stinking ever questioned any of this? My reason for this is probably not true. Surely someone would have noticed the spell placed on those books. But I've never seen anyone try and explain away this mess, so I did it myself in the best way I knew how. Hope you didn't think it was too out there." Really long rant for something that wasn't even too big a deal in the grand scheme of the story. Hope you enjoyed. Both Dean Thomas and Seamus Finnegan said something to the same effect. I did go back and check because I'm a nitpicky butthead. Since I remembered them saying it while typing this, I decided someone in the story could remember this too. Chapter 17. The Heir of Slytherin. Chapter text. James kind of got the worst chapter on this again, didn't he? James began, feeling like ice was trying to freeze him over. He really didn't want this chapter, but he also was dying to know what on earth had happened to his son down there. Steeling himself, he forced out. "The basilisk still isn't my biggest concern right now," Remus grumbled. "I want to know who dragged Ginny down there, who's been doing this stuff all year." Harry just looked at him miserably, as hungry for those answers as any of them. Then he nodded to himself. This question was still number one to him. Despite his gut feeling that Ginny was okay, in this particular moment anyway, he still had no idea what to make of that other memory flash. He desperately wanted to hear the book confirm this. "Creepy," Sirius said, drawing the word out for emphasis. James bleakly remembered just a few hours ago when he made a joking comment that he hoped Harry found this place. It was something new, a part of the school's history that hardly anybody would have known about. He wanted his son to find something like that. Now he just wanted to drag him out of there as fast as possible. All three boys couldn't help but release a snort of mirth at the beginning of that description. All five of them had a very good guess that this statue was of Salazar Slytherin, and the three boys were picturing someone walking up and calling him a monkey to his face. The dry humor only lasted for a moment, but it was appreciated nonetheless in the tense silence. As much as they were all praying Harry would simply find Ginny and get out of there without running into anything, if history had taught them anything so far, Harry's life wasn't going to be that easy. "Ginny," they all breathed, Harry in relief, the others with trepidation. So Harry had found Ginny like they were hoping, but the fact that she was face down meant absolutely nothing good. Could Harry's gut reactions finally be wrong and the poor girl was already dead? James wasn't going to sit around speculating. He blasted on. "You did what?" the four of them screamed. It must have been quite a racket, even upstairs, because the baby went off again. Gently placing the book aside, James blasted off to the stairs, while Lily demanded, "Harry, he was joking, right?" "You didn't really." Harry didn't even begin to deny it. His abashed face was all the answer they needed. His only defense was, "I'm sorry. I panicked. It was in my hand, and I wanted both hands to." He trailed off, giving a helpless shrug. "I know now it was stupid." "At least you recognize that," Remus sighed, flopping back against the couch. "Honestly, remind me again why we don't have an elementary wand safety class," Sirius demanded. "Don't put your wand in your back pocket. Don't toss it around like a stick. Don't go waving it around like a toy." He said all this in a very huffy tone of voice, clearly mimicking someone Harry couldn't place, as he continued in his normal tone. "I didn't even like her, and I listened to those stupid rules." "You can't call them stupid and then say they're needed," Lily pointed out as James came back down the stairs, childless and only slightly less grumpy than when he left. I thought you said you put a silencing charm on his room. He directed at Sirius, pretty sure he was the last one to be up there. I did, he defended at once. Well, it must have worn off then, he sighed, flopping back into his spot. Good Lord, how long have we been at this? He demanded of nothing, rubbing at his eyes, then directing at Harry. I assume they all told you why that was stupid then. We didn't have to, Lily defended. He recognized it was stupid himself. Our boy, James said, grinning weakly. Guess I can't blame you too much. You were in a pretty awful situation. Merlin, Sirius said in shock, causing the three of them to turn their attention to the other two. Has anyone seen the time? We've been at this all day. It's no wonder the charm wore off. James really did check his own watch then and let out a low, throaty whistle while saying, Damn, we missed dinner. Lily released a snort of mirth before saying, Well, we'll have a late one then. I don't want to delay this any longer, and I want Harry out of there. So keep reading James. He shrugged, in no mood to argue the point, and began a little more easily now that he'd had time to clear his head. All five of them shivered in disgust. The four of them never having even met Ginny, and still horrified at the mental image of the dead girl. Harry felt sick inside, even knowing it wasn't true. That was one memory he would gladly erase away all over again. They all started then, not having expected that. They had thought whoever had dragged Ginny down there must be with the basilisk. So if someone was talking to Harry then, they didn't need the book to tell them something really awful was about to happen. You didn't recognize him? Sirius asked, puzzled at once that a name hadn't been in there. He must be someone at the school, though, Remus said, brow furrowing in confusion. Admittedly, we haven't come across anyone this year who it could be, but no one but the students and staff are in the school enough for him to not stick out and be suspicious. Harry was frowning for a different reason this time, somehow knowing the answer was going to be far weirder than anyone would see coming. This just piqued their interest even more. By that description, it clearly meant whoever this boy was, he wasn't really there. But they'd never heard of this type of communication before, which still didn't bode well for Harry. Wah, James began, triple-checking that he had read that right. That arse who framed Hagrid all those years ago, Sirius demanded. You must be joking. Harry shook his head sadly from side to side, saying aloud, No, it was him, or else he has a twin brother who looks and sounds just like him. But 50 years later, Remus demanded, I don't care about genetics, that can't be the same person or even his son. No one looks exactly like someone else. This isn't possible, he still wouldn't look the same. I think you're all missing the point, Lily whispered, eyeing the book with high trepidation. Why is he down there with Harry? That brought them up short. The odd realization that some kid who still looked the same 50 years later was weird, which had derailed them from what Lily had reminded them. After a drawn-out pause, James finally asked, How? With any luck, he'll explain, 'cause I've got nothing, Harry sighed, looking longingly to the book. He was very sure that the headache that was pounding away at him would finally be at ease after this horrid year. Unlike last year, he got none of his answers slowly throughout the year, but more questions on top of questions. Now here he finally was, at the climax of this disastrous year, and he felt it was high time to get this over with. James relented that if there was any justice, this wired ghost riddle kid would explain something soon. Even with Harry's reassurances and Riddle's own declaration, that still wasn't making anyone in the room feel any better. There were some worse things to be then dead, and Ginny seemed to be heading that way. That's not how ghosts look, and you know it, Remus said, not reprimanding even, just being his typical self in pointing things out. Harry pointed out right back, like you, I wasn't exactly expecting that. It was the first thing that came to mind. That's possible, Sirius said, slowly and uneasily, but not to this degree. The most advanced form of that is the magical paintings, and even they can't leave their bindings. Since that diary is his binding, he should not be able to leave it and walk around. Harry was very curious to hear more about that, but now didn't seem the time. All of them puzzled at this, indeed wondering how it could have made its way down there, and how it was all connected. This still didn't even answer their question of who was doing all of this. It actually managed to raise more. I didn't like him before, Lily began, notes of unease already creeping into her voice, and I'm liking him less and less as this goes on. He's unnatural, Remus agreed. Whatever is going on here is something very dark. How Ginny got mixed up in all of this still blows my mind. Harry was frowning and shaking his head from side to side. Somehow he just knew all of the pieces were right there in front of him in that moment, and so he begged his father on so that they would finally come together. Not good, James hissed, beginning to bounce in place, though stopping quickly as this made it very hard to read. Very not good. He shouldn't be able to do that, Lily yelled, her voice an octave higher than was normal. Nothing like this should be happening, Remus snapped back, then immediately apologized and said, Sorry, Lily, just on edge. She acknowledged the apology with the barest of nods, not having been the least bit offended by him. They were all beyond off edge by this point. Sirius had to restrain himself from laughing out loud at this. His poor pup, there was no chance that this would simply be resolved that easily. No, Riddle was there for some very dark reason, and giving Harry back his wand most likely didn't involve those plans. Harry shuddered at that figure of speech, still not appreciating its meaning. I don't like this, Lily moaned, her hand beginning to dig into Harry's again. She really needed that reassurance right then, that her baby really was going to be okay. Harry returned the pressure with a reassuring squeeze, the only comfort he could offer right then. Why? James demanded through gritted teeth. What on earth could he possibly want with you? Harry had no answer for him, except the instinctive one that they weren't going to like his stay in the chamber. Glad you picked up on that, Sirius said weakly, not mocking really. Harry was only 12 at this time, after all. Any normal student wouldn't really question too far what was going on, except trying to get out of danger like Harry was. I'm getting a really bad feeling about that, James murmured, his words not nearly covering the feelings of unease that were still rampaging through him. Remus' mouth opened with a little pop. Upon questioning, though, he just shrugged and murmured, just processing is all. I knew I didn't like that diary, but I really don't like what he's implying. Just keep going, James. I want to hear this. James wanted to do the exact opposite, in fact, and simply take Harry's word for it that everything was fine and move past this already. Still, he couldn't very well leave it like this now, could he? This is foul, beyond loathsome, Lily hissed. How dare he mock her for this? What on earth? Why, she sputtered out of air then, simply waving James on when she realized he still hadn't really answered anything. He was just insulting the insecurities of an 11-year-old, which in itself was awful. He's creeping me out with that, Sirius muttered, mostly to himself. That had already happened to James a long time ago, and he wasn't even there to hear this in person. Just listening to his cruel depictions of mocking Ginny was enough to give him the creeps. Remus shuddered in disgust, not really wanting to answer when Harry asked, I don't get it. Why would he want that? He didn't seem able to bring himself to say those exact words Riddle had. Not for any good reason, I'm sure, Sirius almost whispered. What exactly is this thing? Lily demanded. I've never heard of anything like it. I'm positive I don't want to know the answer, James huffed, before forcing himself to keep going anyways. Sirius actually did retch then, going a funny green color at the thought of that. Harry still dearly wanted to ask what on earth was going on, what this thing was, but one look around, and he realized they had no more idea than him, which was the opposite of comforting. She can't have James wanted to snap, but really he had no way to say it. All the air seemed to have gone out of him. Is it possessing her? Harry asked, looking from the book back to the others very quickly now. Seems like, Remus forced the words out. But again, I've never heard of anything like this. Which is, above all, the creepiest thing, Sirius said in a ghost of his old teasing voice. We're supposed to be able to use you as our walking dictionary. Lily let out an almost hysterical laugh, which died quickly. None of them could really think of anything else to say, though the dominant thought was, why Harry? Why on earth had he been the one to come across this, and why was this thing so transfixed on him? Of course, they all had a pool of concern for poor Ginny as well. She was clearly a victim of something very wrong going on, something that still managed to tie into Harry. James hated every word out of his mouth as he choked out. Harry very dearly wanted to interrupt again, with questions like, why hadn't any of them noticed Ginny was acting weird all year? At least her brother should have noticed something. These questions, though, would never truly be answered. Amusing, Lily hissed. Did he really just say that? I can't imagine what must have been going through the poor girl's mind, but amusing is far from it. This thing is a sadist, Sirius grumbled. None of them needed to imagine that, since it was on Harry's face right now, and most likely mirrored on their own. By the end of this, Harry wanted to yell and rage and scream that he needed to shut up now, but it would be pointless yelling at his dad for that. Silence seemed to have struck the room as Riddle just seemed to keep talking, none of them able to think of anything to add to how horrible this was. Which is when the attacks stopped, Lily realized, wanting to slap herself for not having linked that together before. Of all, the Remus began, but quickly cut himself off. If Harry hadn't found it, then some other unsuspecting soul would have come across it. Since it had been in a girl's bathroom, even a mostly unused one, Harry finding it was almost, barely, a good thing. For if another girl had found it, she possibly would have gone through the same process as Ginny all over again. At least Harry had never written in it more than once, saving him from this horrid fate. Sirius opened his mouth to repeat the question that was on everyone's mind. Why on earth this demon seemed so intent on Harry, but James quickly kept going. Sirius then had to bite his tongue to keep himself from making a fangirl joke. Now wasn't the time, nor would it be appreciated. Don't insult him, James snarled. While I'd love to burn this thing, I can't wait to find out where on earth Ginny got it, and drag it to the ministry and prove it wasn't Hagrid. He cut himself off in a muttering of curses. Lily blinked in surprise. This question hadn't occurred to her yet, but it was a good one. Where had Ginny gotten a hold of this thing? She couldn't imagine it would have been anywhere at her own house. Her parents would probably die before bringing something so dark into their home, and it couldn't be at the school. Where had she come across this? Crazy, psychopathic, sadistic, Remus had to poke Sirius in the ribs to get him to stop. All three boys were in too much of a towering temper to correct such a ludicrous sentence. On top of everything, this idiot didn't know the first thing about werewolves, and the fact that werewolf cubs didn't even exist. Harry dearly wanted to ask about this, but still held his tongue. This thing knows nothing about magical creatures, does it? James really did scoff this time. While there are forest trolls, there aren't any in the Forbidden Forest. You would know, Lily said, trying for a bit of good-natured humor, which really was appreciated right then. That is a very good point. Harry was loath to admit and agree with anything this thing said, but since it was about Hagrid, and he's got an ego on top of all his other lovely qualities, Sirius grumbled. Really? Lily demanded. Only Dumbledore, no other teacher, hell anybody with a brain bothered to question this. Prejudices, Remus offered bitterly. I'm sure most anyone can guess Hagrid's half-giant. So when someone like Riddle would have come along and accused Hagrid of doing this, they ate it right up. This is disgusting, James growled. He might have even kept going, but Harry was quick to get him back on track. While he hated this idea as much as anyone, there was no good in sitting about and talking about it when they could possibly fix it. Can't imagine why, Remus said, sarcasm dripping from every syllable. Could it possibly be he didn't fall for your demented act? With the blackest, cruelest kind of magic I've never even heard of, Remus said through clenched teeth. There's no way a 16-year-old did this, Sirius said weakly. This is the darkest, most advanced magic. Can we not? Lily moaned. I don't want to be sitting around thinking about this. It's dark and twisted, evil and weird, we all agree, but I want to see Harry getting out of there before midnight. That silenced them for now anyways. Do you think, Harry began hesitantly, is there any way Ginny was somehow, I don't know, trying to influence so that these set of circumstances happened? It can't really be a coincidence no one's died. They puzzled this for a moment before James said, You know, I wouldn't be too surprised if that were true, Harry. Everyone who's been attacked had a means out. Ginny may have been semi-influencing the choices to give them a chance. Harry beamed, knowing this could never be proven one way or another. No way would he ever ask such a thing, but liking the idea anyways. James choked out that last word as if he'd had a dung bomb tossed down his throat. The horrid idea that someone wanted his son dead was awful enough, let alone him having to say it. Why? Lily demanded of no one in particular. I don't even know what this is. What on earth does this creature have against you? Harry just shrugged, feeling frustrated he couldn't remember, though he was sure he found out in a few moments anyways. Why would she go back to it? Sirius grumbled. If she had the ability to throw it away the first time, why didn't she just try again? Or better, go get a teacher, oh, now I understand. Remus cut him off. It was Ginny who stole the diary from Harry. Ginny pieced together what had happened to her, which is why she got rid of it. She must have recognized it was doing something to her. When she saw it in Harry's possession, though, she was afraid the same thing would happen to him. That still doesn't explain why she didn't take it to someone, Lily sighed. I think, Harry said slowly, then broke off as soon as he had begun. Growing far beyond annoyed at his inability to give these answers, he instead said, I know I understand everything before the night's over. Let's please just hear about Ginny getting out of here, then we can keep questioning this, he all but pleaded in the end. Nodding in assent, James forced himself to read on. All five of them grimaced as they got their answer anyways. Yes, the fear that Ginny would be blamed for these attacks would certainly hold the girl's tongue about this evil diary. Harry gritted his teeth so hard he could almost hear them cracking. Riddle had targeted one of his friends on purpose that time. If this spectre didn't die this night, he certainly was going too soon. So now it's boring to watch a child beg for her life, James howled in his head, but didn't interrupt himself to say it aloud. Everyone here looked on the brink of yelling themselves soon. Remus swallowed hard as he realized something else. He was feeding off of Ginny. The longer this conversation went on, the closer she was to dying. That's why all the talking and explaining. He was purposely drawing all of this out. He very dearly wanted to point this out to the others, but either they had already realized it for themselves, or it would do no good in the end. So he decided against it, knowing it would only hurt Harry. Voldemort, Sirius asked in genuine confusion, what on earth has this got to do with him? Harry opened, and just as quickly closed his mouth. He had known there was something significant about the name Tom Riddle, and he just knew they were on the brink of figuring it out. He tried his best to explain this, and now very curious James read. All five of them felt themselves going slack-jawed for a moment, but James wasn't giving anyone the chance to say anything until he read. Voldemort is just an anagram, Sirius said, almost laughing in shock. I suppose that makes sense in a certain light, James agreed. After all, it's not a surname or anything of the like. I guess Riddle or Tom just wouldn't have the same spooky effect. Are you kidding me? Lily screeched, going white as a ghost. How are you laughing about this? What, how, why is Voldemort? I don't even know how to phrase this, it's so ludicrous. How is a bit of Voldemort walking and talking through a diary? Remus offered weakly. Lily nodded quickly as she said, yes, that. Harry very dearly wanted to answer, but the price was yet another stab at his brain, a very powerful one this time, he was sure. He had known from the get-go that there was something very particular he should remember about this diary, and it related to that question. But what? The others were so stumped, they couldn't even begin to speculate on this. They had never heard of anything like this. Even Sirius, who had heard of some pretty dark magic growing up around his kind of family, couldn't piece this one together. Only taking a brief comfort in that Harry was still here now, and his insistence that Ginny survived this, was James able to read. Sirius suddenly snorted so violently, Remus leaned over him in shock and concern before Sirius began laughing hard. James had to reread that sentence almost a dozen times, and he was still frozen in shock. Coming out of his laughing fit, only slightly, Sirius said in a breathy voice, Vival Voldemort's a half-blood. Oh, Merlin, I can't breathe, and he really didn't seem able to keep sucking in air as he continued laughing. The pureblood supremacists of the world is a half-blood. Lily said the sentence slowly and distinctly, tasting the words and cracking a smile herself. Well, that's certainly something I never saw coming. I'll bet his followers don't know that, Remus cackled. I've always said there's no way possible every Death Eater's a pureblood. There's just not that many of them. It's no wonder Riddle's so lax. Is that what we're going to call him now? James asked in a conversational tone of voice. Riddle, I am completely okay with this. Well, he certainly doesn't deserve the title of Voldemort, supreme ruler of liars anymore, Sirius agreed, finally gaining back his breath. He still had a gleam of victory surrounding him. He had been contemplating going over to his, oh so proud, parents, and informing them a little bit about their saviors of the wizarding world. James pressed further, asking, so Dumbledore knows this, right? After all, Ollivander knew Tom Riddle turned into Voldemort, and I bet my wand Dumbledore must know this. So Dumbledore would have looked into this and known about him being a half-blood. Why hasn't he spread this around? It would put a real cramp in his regime if everyone knew. Maybe he can't prove it, Lily offered. I mean, I'd love to look into this myself, but what if you just can't? Wizards aren't very good about birth certificates or anything. This is fun and all, Harry said, a silly smile still plastered across his face watching his family enjoy this revelation. And I hate to break the mood, but can we please finish this year? I'd still feel better seeing Ginny get out of there. What's a matter, pup? Don't trust your own gut, Sirius joked. Harry merely grinned, not willing to admit that this was it exactly. He knew by now, though, that if he said this aloud, they would all tell him that they trusted his gut, but he dreaded the idea that sometime soon his gut feeling was going to be wrong, and it was going to lead to something awful happening. So he brushed off the joke, and James decided to keep going. Really? Lily said, looking truly upset at this. The worst wizarding war that's existing right now all stems back to the fact that Voldemort has daddy issues. I'll admit, it's absolutely horrible his father abandoned them because his mother was a witch. But she broke herself off, shaking her head sadly from side to side. Unable to continue, it was so pathetic. Sirius couldn't help but release another snort of mirth. Putting it like that made Voldemort look like some bratty child rather than the darkest name in their history. "'Cause that's not, the most big-headed thing I've ever heard," James scoffed. "That's rich coming from you," Lily poked fun, grinning over at her husband, "considering how big your head was through most of school." "Oh, I deflated, kind of," James grinned, not looking nearly offended by that as he once had been. Sirius and Remus both gave appreciative chuckles, while Harry watched his parents curiously. The two of them seemed like two people with completely opposite personalities most of the time, so he was genuinely curious how they had gotten together. He really wanted to ask that question eventually. This time Remus began applauding Harry, backing him up on that 100%. Sirius and James considered it for a moment before deciding that they agreed there wasn't another living person who had done half the things their headmaster had done. Lily was the only one who looked about disagreeing, but she was also just that little bit sore from last year. Still not completely convinced, he hadn't set Harry up last year to do all those dangerous stunts, and he had hardly done anything this year to prove otherwise. At this moment, though, she would have gladly taken Dumbledore, or anyone for that matter, down there with her son. So she wasn't going to go around disagreeing with what he said either. Despite the situation, James still had a bit of a goofy smile on his face as he said, "Actually, it was a corrupt government board headed by a pompous arse," Sirius corrected, "and even then he won't be gone long. I'm still positive there's no way he made that injunction legally, so someone's going to be able to get around it soon." "Music?" Lily puzzled, wondering if she'd heard that wrong. "Did you decide to start singing or something?" Remus asked. Harry deigned him with a "you're not funny" look, but James didn't even look up. "Fox," James breathed in surprise. "Unless there's another Phoenix loyal enough to Dumbledore to respond like this," Remus agreed, grinning wildly. "Does this explain the music?" Lily asked. "Why is it calling music?" "Phoenix music is rumored to embed those it trusts with bounds of strength," Sirius told her brightly. "It's supposed to encourage bravery and make you fearless and stuff." "I give you half points for that explanation," Remus laughed outright at him. "You sounded pretty smart until you finished with and stuff." Sirius just rolled his eyes at him, while James still continued on, now more curious than ever. No one stopped this time to ask what on earth Fawkes could be holding. Remus gave a slow, sarcastic clap this time, giving Sirius the joyful opportunity to smack him again and get him to stop. "Do what?" Lily couldn't help but ask this time. "Why?" James couldn't help but agree. Would Fawkes bring that? Is he planning to try and convince Riddle he didn't belong in Slytherin and ruin his life further? Harry chuckled in amusement, but none of them had any idea what could be going on right now. "Thanks for that awful reminder," James muttered in disgust. "Something you'll never understand," Lily hissed viciously, wanting more than anything in that moment to be there for her son again, to stand in front of him and curse this demented creature into oblivion for threatening her baby. Remus couldn't help but wince, remembering all over again why Riddle was drawing out this conversation. Remus looked around and noticed no one seemed too surprised by this, so they had all worked it out then. They all looked equal amounts pissed off that Harry was being threatened like this again and worried about his situation at hand. How had Harry made it out of this alive? Did he summon the basilisk and have it kill this evil spirit? "Personally, I wouldn't have told him that," Sirius scoffed. Not that he can do anything against you, but it still would have been all the more fun for him to never know the answer to that. Harry shrugged. He had just enjoyed that one moment of lording that over the Dark Lord. James' voice rang with pride for his son as he read out that last part. It genuinely bothers me that he knows about that, and I've never heard of it, James huffed. Guess we should just be happy we don't really know the same things as this nutter, Sirius offered. Plus, we know now, Remus added vindictively. I disagree, Lily snapped with pure venom. His very existence as being a loving person makes him infinitely more special than your heartless arse. Harry blushed furiously at the compliment, while the other boys couldn't help but agree. James' smile vanished at once. He looked like he was being force-fed vomit as he continued. Sirius was muttering a couple of foul things under his breath, very much wanting to deny those last two, and hating that he couldn't. James was grumbling and snarling that these were all circumstantial, stupid things. For anyone to imply his son was the smallest bit like Voldemort made all four adults in the room want to curse something into oblivion. Harry, who had begun to look rather upset at what he clearly did see as parallels, smiled around at them all again. Clearly, his family wasn't reading into these things, so he had no inclination to do so either. Well, this can't be good, Lily moaned. What even would happen if he tried to use a spell with Harry's wand? Sirius asked curiously. I mean, he's tangible enough to hold it, but I still don't even know what he is. Will the wand recognize magic in him and perform the spell? Or maybe this memory doesn't know itself, Remus shrugged, and he's not going to risk it. Whatever he is planning, though, I agree with Lily. This isn't going to be good. He mentally added that, if Ginny did die, this thing very well might likely be at least some kind of human again, and could possibly do whatever the real Voldemort had done was doing now. Time travel was making this way too complicated, since his instincts now was crawling at the idea of two Voldemorts existing at once, while he reminded himself that in this timeline Voldemort had died, and this would be a rebirth of him. He stopped his brain from trying to continue the paradox as James continued. He's summoning the basilisk, James asked wearily. Well, this shouldn't be too bad, Sirius said with far more confidence than he really felt, since Harry can control it just as well as Riddle. But, Lily began, then bit at her lip again. Then, sucking in a deep breath, she voiced, but Riddle obviously has far more experience with this. He's also been controlling this snake longer, so what if? She couldn't even finish. The idea swimming around was too awful to put into words. Since none of them really had any idea how Parselmouths worked, James simply hoped the book would explain. Quite a bit, I'd wager, Remus offered weakly, as highly intelligent as they are. Fawkes might not be able to win this fight, but he will be of use. James couldn't help but retch all over again at having to say that, dearly wishing he'd never have to hear those words again in relation to his son, let alone have to say them as many times as he had in this chapter. Is Harry not even going to try speaking to it? Remus wondered, but kept that thought to himself. If Harry didn't think of it himself, well, he could hardly blame his cub, since the act of speaking and controlling snakes was still new enough to him. All four of them recoiled from that disturbing mental image, now willing to give up their lives all over again if they could have just been there for Harry in that one deadly moment. Harry felt very bad for his family, who all looked akin to corpses, they were getting so pale. He floundered, trying to come up with something to help distract them again. Clearly, his mental imagination was going to be the death of them all. The only one that came to mind was to offer up the explanation to them that this particular basilisk never actually spoke to him in words, in a language like he knew he could understand in the chamber. Maybe it couldn't speak its own mind when under the command of someone telling it what to do. But Harry got the impression none of them knew enough about this to offer their own opinion, and wanted too much to hear of anything else but the giant killer snake for Harry to start a discussion about it. So Harry, in fact, had nothing of comfort to offer them. In his young life, this was by far the scariest thing that had happened to him yet, and words of comfort just weren't going to cut it this time. So he instead remained quiet, hoping the book would get past this quickly, and Skipper, however, he got out of there with an alive Ginny in tow. James at least no longer sounded like he was reading his own death warrant. Harry wasn't as alone down there as he had been thinking. Admittedly, a bird, even a phoenix, wasn't the kind of help he would have been for his son then, but it was better than nothing. Even if Fox tipped the scales just that little bit, made it possible enough that Harry could get out of there, then he'd be just a tiny bit happy again. Then James' voice choked off all over again when he realized Harry was looking into his own death. No one had air in their lungs to question the fact of Harry's survival. James himself only managed to keep going out of the will to see this miracle. "It's blind," Sirius finally broke the long stream of silence. "Thank Merlin," Lily practically sobbed. "Thank Fox, or even Dumbledore for owning the bird," or Remus broke off in semi-hysterical laughter. "How come Fox didn't die if it was looking into the basilisk's eyes?" Harry asked, a bit too late, but finally coming up with another random question. James was more than happy to respond, saying, "Phoenixes are damn near indestructible. They have healing tears, so their eyes are the most invulnerable part of their body. No one's ever put this to the test, but I guess Phoenix eyes beat basilisk eyes." Still shaking a bit, though now in relief, James was finally able to keep reading in almost normal tones. "Guess it is still venomous," Remus muttered to himself. "And how big again?" The others ignored him, now confident this bird was the reason Harry had survived. Had Fox even somehow found a way to kill the basilisk? They certainly hoped it got to that part soon. Sirius released a semi-hysterical giggle as he said, "Now he's trying to make it lose its sense of smell, too. Next thing, he'll be trying to rip out its teeth." While none of them had exactly been back to a happy place in this story, this verbal reminder from Harry himself needing help made them all want to take him up in a hug and never let go. Well, this was a pretty easy distraction. Had any of them ever figured out why the sorting hat was even there? Why had Fox grabbed it? None of them bothered voicing these questions aloud, though, since no one had any answer, and they were all just too eager for Harry to hurry up and get out of there. Lily felt such a tightening in her throat, it was almost impossible to swallow and continue breathing. Her little baby, reduced to cowering on the floor from a deadly snake, alone with nothing but a rangy old hat. She had never wanted that mental image, and now wanted to burn her mind for giving it to her. James' tone finally changed from outright fear to genuine puzzlement, a much better way of reading than every other word pondering if his son was going to die. "A sword," Sirius burst out. "Not some nice advice on, I don't know, summoning a rooster or something, but a bloody sword. What the bloody hell is Harry supposed to do with that? Duel the stupid snake? Why, where did the sword even come from?" Sirius had been silent and pent up for so long, it seemed he would never stop his fountain of questions. But then Remus gave him a very sharp poke, causing Sirius to go silent again. None of them had an inkling of an idea how the hat worked. That was old founder magic. They wouldn't get an answer to any of these questions until the book said them, if the book even did answer. "Ha!" Remus and Sirius both breathed, taking relish in this small victory. Then their mouths flopped open in horror at all the horrible implications of that. Harry had stabbed it in the roof of the mouth, most likely hitting its brain and killing it, but that also meant Harry's whole arm was in between all of those venomous, deadly fangs. Each one of them took a moment to inspect the boy again, as if confirming he still had that arm and it wasn't snapped off. James couldn't help it. That was the final straw. He actually did twist over the side of the couch and vomit. Harry leaped back in shock, looking to the others in genuine concern. His mom was openly crying as she produced her wand and vanished the steaming pile. Remus and Sirius looked ready to keel over any moment. Harry's mind scrambled about wildly as he finally blurted out, "Are you okay?" James brushed the back of his hand against his mouth, giving a weak chuckle as his hazel eyes met Harry's green ones. "Am I okay?" he repeated, as if he'd never heard such a sentence in his life. "Harry, I just read a sentence that under any normal circumstances would have meant that you would be dead. Not sitting there, but dead. On the floor," he broke off before his mouth could keep going, shuddering all over again. Harry looked about the room again, then offered, "Did you want me to finish? You know I'm not dead, but if this is too awful—" "No," James said, bolstering himself up again after one more furtive look at his only child. "No," he repeated with conviction, "you did survive. There's a phoenix in the room," he reminded the others, the only explanation remotely possible as to why he was talking to his son. "And so Fox is going to save you, and I will later be embarrassed for my overreaction." "That wasn't an overreaction," Sirius told him weakly, "since I actually did black out there for a minute." Lily was brushing tears furiously from her face, and Remus was rubbing his eyes hard like he was trying to prevent himself from joining her. Harry felt something stirring inside himself, warmed beyond belief that these four cared about him so deeply like this. Sucking in two more deep breaths, James forced out. Despite his own words of comfort, James still couldn't help his upper lip from curling in disgust as he continued reading about Harry dying like this. No one could muster themselves up to interrupt. The only comfort any of them had right now was the red and gold bird that just had to appear any second now. They all released a collective breath of relief at this confirmation. Sirius had to choke himself off from saying something along the lines of, "You would thank the bird," while you're dying. But even the thought of those words being put through his mouth made him want to pass out all over again. Remus actually did release a funny sound, like a laugh but strangled with emotion. Clearly Riddle didn't know the properties of Phoenix tears. His ignorance would be Harry's salvation. James very dearly wished his son found some way to murder this apparition of Riddle soon, just to get him to shut up. He was still so emotionally wrung, he didn't think he could take much more of this taunting over his son's body before he really did curse something. Lily muttered something indistinct under her breath. The boys might have caught a few words, but they were all so disturbing they pretended they hadn't. "Challenged," Harry grumbled out loud. "I'd gladly avoid him for the rest of my life. He keeps bothering me." All four of them really did laugh then, a genuine sound of amusement at Harry's truly annoyed look. His use of bothering to describe constant attempts of murder was just slightly underwhelming as well. James then groaned again, pressing his face into the pages of the book in utter disgust. Pulling away, he asked the ceiling, "What are the bloody odds I got every single stinking chapter where someone said that horrid word?" Lily reached around and gave her husband's shoulder a comforting squeeze, which James took gladly. They all obstinately ignored that putrid sentence, since they knew the opposite was happening. All five of them couldn't help but beam with pleasure. They had known without a doubt this was what was going to happen, but hearing it in words made the whole ordeal bearable. Then they all grimaced when they realized Riddle really had grown so powerful he could use spells now. This didn't bode well for Ginny, or Harry for that matter. Now the snake was dead, but how had Harry gotten past Riddle? "Twat," Remus snapped, more than happy at this psychopath's lap in knowledge. James couldn't help but wince all over again. Harry had just skipped death, and now his very own wand was being thrust back into his face for yet another go. Was Fox going to take this spell too? How long could they keep playing this game before someone's luck ran out? "While I agree that thing needs to be burned," Sirius said slowly, "what good is it going to do now?" "Riddle said it himself," Lily pointed out, going bright-eyed with glee now. He had put a bit of himself in that object. So maybe, if Harry destroys it, this thing will finally disappear. James fervently hoped so, now reading eagerly, almost praying this is what happened. "If that doesn't do it, nothing will," Remus beamed. And good riddance to rot in hell, you. Sirius finally did get all of his pent-up emotions out by spouting every foul word that came to mind. The others sat there and let him, venting in his own way until he finally ran out of steam. "Souvenir," James said weakly, causing Remus and Sirius to burst out with renewed genuine laughter at what was clearly an old joke between them. Harry and Lily smiled indulgently at each other, more than willing to put up with all their inside jokes if it meant nothing this awful ever happened again. "The poor thing," Lily almost sobbed with her, as she remembered all over again the traumatic experience this 11-year-old had been through. "It'll be a miracle if she isn't scarred for life because of this." James read all of this with a miserable look on his face. What Harry had just endured was the epitome of awful, but this little girl had been through something equally as tormenting all year. She wasn't even his kid, and he wanted to hug her in comfort. "Never," Remus vowed at the suddenly heartbroken look on Harry's face. "If there's any decency in the world, no one will look twice at Ginny once you tell them what happened." "But I broke the diary." Harry seemed unable to stop himself from arguing back. "What if she really does get in trouble for this?" "It's not going to happen," Sirius all but growled. "It's just not possible anyone could believe Ginny could do something like this." Harry nodded, feeling relieved for once his first instinct was to agree with them. It was just his pessimistic side that was trying to say otherwise. "Thank God you're alive," Lily stated at once, And the only reason you wouldn't come back next year is because they'll be worried sick to let you out of their sight again. Can't blame them, James muttered sadly. Ron, they all said in relief, the distant memory of his wand cursing Lockhart seeming like a gold mine of happiness compared to what they had just been through. Damn, Sirius said in congratulations, and he did that without magic. Props to that kid. Long story, James said weakly, drawing the first word out in remembrance, and dearly hoping he wouldn't have to reread that story himself again. A question I'd still like answered, Sirius said in an almost chipper tone. Their utter relief that Harry was finally out of there was more than palpable, and finally bringing normal conversation back around. So sweet, Lily sighed, unable to stop herself from grinning at her son, who was still trying to put the girl's feelings first. And I still regret nothing, Remus said in full glee. He deserves every bit of that irony. Know the effects of that all too well, Harry thought bitterly, an inkling of pity beginning to form for Lockhart. And he saves the day again, Lily grinned. You know, James, I'm genuinely thinking I want one of those. First a Java and a crop for our garden, now you want a phoenix. We've already got Click and Hickory. Exactly how many pets do you want? James demanded good-naturedly. To be perfectly honest, he didn't mind one bit. He would always indulge his wife in whatever she wanted. Lily shrugged, not looking the least bit deterred at the animal count that was beginning to stack up. I'm wondering, though, that there must be another way to get up, Remus voiced. I suppose I can think of a spell or two, but you'd really think Slytherin would have given some kind of ladder back up. Let's not have Harry stick around to find out, Sirius grumbled. I think you can finally stop giving that bonehead such a title, Remus told Harry pleasantly. Harry shrugged. It hadn't yet occurred to him. He had too much other stuff on his mind at the time. Despite how much all five of them genuinely hated this guy, they couldn't help but weakly laugh at this childlike innocence. And may it stay that way forever, Lily muttered in disgust, to general nods of agreement, except for Harry, who had an odd feeling he'd find that chamber opened at least once more, but not for anything bad. And a good day to you two, Sirius grumbled, not really appreciating how close that sentence came to not being true. You, James huffed, trying to distract himself from why that stuff was there. Oh yes, that's just what Harry needs, Remus said, trying his very hardest to suppress a grin, another admirer. Harry didn't even have the energy to glare at him for that joke. He was just as ready for this year to be over as them. Really, Ron, Lily demanded of the ceiling. Is now really the time to be poking fun at your sister? I find it rather appropriate, Sirius countered. It's kind of his way of saying, the world goes on. You nearly died, but I'm still going to poke fun at you. Lily was beginning to understand why Sirius and his little brother didn't get along very well. Then again, she wasn't all too clear why she herself put up with him. If he wasn't James' best friend, she was sure she would have strangled him out of pure annoyance 10 times over. Never mind the fact that in recent years she had come to see him as her own sort of brother. Why did you knock if you were just going to go in? Remus couldn't help but ask. Why did you knock at all? Sirius grinned. I think, in this particular set of circumstances, you really could have just waltzed in. Harry just shrugged as Sirius took the book, having no response to any of them. Chapter 18. Darby's Reward. Chapter text. They had a very late dinner then, all just needing to take a break from what was hands down the worst chapter yet. After a nice relaxing meal, Harry even offered they could quit for the night, since nothing this awful could happen the rest of the year. They disagreed, though, stating that they may as well finish. There couldn't really be any surprises left, right? Before he began, Sirius noted the length of the book and told them, I think this is the last chapter. I bloody well hope so, James groaned, massaging his stomach and still not looking 100%. He had eaten a very light dinner, something Lily had noted and was genuinely concerned about, because I honestly can't take much more from this one. Harry gave them all sympathetic looks, but really couldn't think of anything to say as Sirius read. They all nodded, none of them really too surprised Ginny's parents were up at the school, and more than pleased they were some of the firsts to find out she was alive. There were finally smiles back in the room, all of them genuinely happy in that one small moment that this family was still whole. Well, I was right, Sirius mentally sighed. One more bad thing, and Dumbledore's back. He hated that the bad thing was that poor Ginny had supposedly died, though, so he didn't bring it up. You're not going to like it, Harry offered weakly, thinking that if these people's reactions were anything close to his family's, he'd be lucky if someone in that room didn't faint as well. Everything. James couldn't help but ask. Harry nodded, not having left anything out of the story that time. He'd been too worried Ginny was going to be blamed, so he added as much ridiculous detail as he could manage, while leaving her out of this as long as possible. Not remotely concerned for his own place at the school at that point so long as she wasn't punished. Putting it like that doesn't sound nearly as dramatic as reading it all through, Remus chuckled weakly. Sorry I couldn't just summarize it, Harry admitted. Nah, the fun, good parts almost make up for the horrible, you could have died parts, Sirius chuckled. Surprisingly, the others did agree. It was horrible, heart-wrenching, and many other synonyms that they had to hear about their little Harry having to go through all of this, but they were also getting something in return. A true record of their boy's life, things he might not even have told them if they had survived. What 12-year-old would tell them about the singing Valentine? It was the little things like this that made the story worthwhile. Oh, it wasn't quite 100, Lily murmured. I could actually go back and count, but I might go bald in the process if I tried. All 5 of them were now tense and upset again, knowing they really couldn't stand it if she was blamed for this mess. Sirius read with fervor, hoping desperately some miracle would help the girl. That sentence created a whole stirring of emotions in the room, the least of which was relief that Ginny wasn't going to be blamed. So, did Dumbledore know what was going on this whole time? Lily asked hesitantly. His crimes against Harry had been bad enough last year, but if he had stood by with even having an inkling that something bad was going on with Ginny, did he say Voldemort really was alive? James demanded, hating that he couldn't go one bloody chapter without wanting to snatch up his son and go into hiding for the rest of his life. How did Dumbledore know it was Voldemort enchanting Ginny? Remus grumbled, not exactly sorry, but stunned all the same. The 3 of them had asked their questions almost exactly at the same time, so it took a moment to sort out and decide if any of them even had an answer to any of the above. They didn't. After a few circular arguments where nothing was remotely resolved, Sirius kept reading, knowing that Dumbledore really hadn't explained much last year, but hoping he might this time. Poor guy, James said in sympathy. Ginny wasn't even his daughter, and he'd felt wretched at the idea. He could only guess at how Arthur was really feeling right then. And yet, I still hate him, Sirius told no one in particular. Barely recognizable, Remus demanded. I've never seen him, but I've heard he doesn't look the least bit human. Some people say he isn't, Lily agreed, though now I guess we know that isn't true. That's pretty sound advice, James nodded, happy someone had said this with Harry around. Hopefully nothing like this would come again. Lily grimaced, all for the fact that her parents were educating Ginny on this, but now didn't seem the time to reprimand. Yes, her parents were scared, but couldn't they have held off telling her this? Then she remembered all the times she spun on her own son in fear of what she had just discovered he'd done, and recognized she had scolded first. Guess it was just a parent thing that you snap in fear, even if it is at the child themselves. She found it in one of her books. Sirius demanded, looking flabbergasted. Was that thing being sold at Flourish and Blart's or something? Not possible, James shot down. I can't imagine this thing in a shop like that. Well, surely Ginny isn't lying, Remus frowned. So what else could it be? They were rather annoyed they truly did seem at a dead end this time, and all the more upset it didn't seem possible they could easily prevent this thing from falling into someone else's hands. Though they had all been praying for this, they still couldn't help but release a breath of relief at this confirmation. As I'm sure they will be for some time, James agreed sadly. He had only just found out his son really should have died in that chamber as well, and he still didn't look any kind of okay about it. Deal with us? Harry asked curiously. We aren't really going to be punished, are we? There's not actually a school rule saying we can't go into the chamber, is there? Well, no, Sirius said, unable to suppress a grin at the outraged look on Harry's face. But you did admit to several other rule breakings. Going into the forest comes to mind. Then Harry turned sheepish and uncertain, now hoping he really wouldn't get into trouble himself now that it was clear Ginny was in the clear. Lily then said something very unladylike, not looking the least bit abashed as she continued. He's not really going to expel you, is he? You did save her life. All those things you admitted to doing wouldn't warrant expulsion. Harry couldn't help but grin at his mother, glad to see she would have been just as outraged as anyone else if Dumbledore did kick them out. Sirius didn't feel like waiting around for an answer, but blasted on to see if their old headmaster really would do something like that. They released yet another breath of relief. Happy Dumbledore was indeed eating his words. Harry and Ron getting punished on top of everything else that had happened tonight would have been a bit too much injustice. They all beamed with pride at that. Unlike last year, they felt these two boys fully deserved that praise for the remarkable job of everything they'd done this year. Well, Remus began before breaking out into laughter. That should put a twist in Voldemort's knickers, James cackled. My son taking away his stupid trophy and proving Hagrid's innocence. So, would this mean Hagrid could go back to school and learn more magic? Lily asked eagerly. Harry suddenly cocked his head to the side in puzzlement as he responded slowly. Well, yes, it should. I know for a fact Dumbledore says he doesn't have a record anymore, but for some reason Hagrid never actually goes back to school. He still lives there as gamekeeper, though. He finished this with a sense that he had left something out, though he had no idea what. Did Hagrid hold another title at school, perhaps? I wonder why, Sirius asked in puzzlement. Did he at least get his wand fixed? Harry just shrugged, saying, Can't tell you that. Doubt I ever asked him anyways, even if I could remember. It seems a bit personal. Fair enough, they all agreed, deciding to move past this for now. I still haven't. Remus couldn't help but snicker all over again, and I'm going to enjoy this one for a long time. Though I do wonder what kind of idiot they're going to get next year. You've somehow got a worse track record than us. Harry gave him a puzzled look. He had been wondering that himself, but still had no honest way to answer that. No, all five of them muttered at once, bitter hatred for his lies still lingering tenfold, especially what he had tried to do to Harry. Remus smacked Sirius for that, then Sirius let out a surprised yelp of pain and demanded, What was that for? I thought you'd appreciate that one. Don't joke like that, Sirius, Remus scoffed. With a wicked grin, Sirius flipped the book so Remus could see for himself, which made Remus smile like he'd just gotten his Christmas and birthday all at once. I still don't believe it. This is wonderful. The others were too busy laughing at the whole exchange to get in a real comment. Say what? Lily demanded. Laughter dried up at once. Is that saying Dumbledore knew what he had done? Maybe he couldn't prove it. James murmured. I mean, no one else in the entire wizarding community seemed to have noticed anything either. Lily sighed as she backed down, and also admitted she couldn't start blaming Dumbledore for every little thing that ever went wrong around that school. He was a powerful wizard, but even he couldn't fix everything. Truest words yet, Remus muttered, still rather enjoying this. Harry looked genuinely puzzled by Lockhart's predicament. He seemed to be in the same boat as Harry had been when he'd awoken, but he had advanced some by then. He understood jokes and metaphors like Dumbledore had just made so had something else happened to him other than a memory charm being placed on him. He struggled to remember, but the moment his head began pounding all over again, he let it go. He had gone so long without that concussive pain returning, he didn't want to break now when they were so close to being done. Harry nodded to himself. That had been something else he was wondering. How had Fawkes known to come to him? He had meant to ask, but in all the hubbub down there, he'd never found his chance. He supposed it was just the magical quality of the bird that, when showing its master loyalty, a phoenix knew to come. That's putting it mildly, James hissed, frowning anew at what he knew would give him nightmares tonight of that green-hued cavern. That hasn't been bothering you now, has it? Lily demanded at once, feeling repulsed her son could think something of himself as to be compared to Voldemort. At first, Harry admitted, but then I saw the way you guys reacted and how you brushed all that stuff off, so I didn't really think on it after that. All four of them beamed with pride, happy beyond words Harry really was relying on them in this way. Which means you were really afraid you were, James groaned. Yes, Harry admitted, but not now, he finished with a reminder, making his dad smile once more. Please, Sirius scoffed. While I'm not saying you should have been in there, even if you had been, you'd have been expelled the next day. Don't tell me Snape wouldn't have found some way to kick you out because you got snarky with him in class. James and Remus nodded in agreement, while Lily just rolled her eyes at all of them. All five of them were frowning all over again as Remus asked, So, why would Voldemort being able to do something mean anything to Harry? Harry could feel a bead of sweat beginning to trickle down the back of his neck. Before he realized it, He was almost panting with the effort to keep a sudden memory from emerging, blasting his skull into fire, and Harry, James finally broke into his concentration. "Relax, son." Harry nodded miserably as he opened his mouth. "But I'm sorry," Remus blurted out before Harry could, mischievous, and giving him a smirk. "I should have known better by now then to direct a question like that at you." "What are you apologizing for? You can't help it," Harry blustered, rubbing at his temple all over again. "Exactly," Sirius grinned. "You can't help but try to draw up the memories and answer. So stop trying to apologize for it." He nodded in understanding, but began slowly and hesitantly. "I think I'm fixing to find something out. Something Dumbledore tells me. You guys aren't going to like it." They exchanged heavy looks at that, very worried at Harry's reaction, but already assuring him that they didn't care one jot what Dumbledore could ever say. They all still loved him. Sirius went back to his reading, deciding he hated this chapter damn near as much as the last one because of the way it was making Harry feel. Sirius' voice was already spiking in confusion and fear at the implications this implied, but he didn't have to guess that Harry must question Dumbledore about this, so he kept going loudly in hopes for a better explanation. "That's all we get." Lily whimpered when it seemed Sirius had frozen up, meaning there wasn't anything else. "I really don't like the sound of that. What does that even mean?" How could he? She broke off when she realized she had scooped up Harry's hand again and was wringing it instead of her own. She smiled sheepishly at him, but he didn't pull away. They all sat there for a long time, alternately soothing Harry that what they said was still true. They didn't care one teensy little bit. But they still really didn't like what this was implying. The fact that they had no idea, not even an inkling to guess at what this could mean for Harry, scared them more than anything. Harry seemed fine now, though, so deciding the boy had been worried enough for one day, they firmly pushed this topic aside for later. "Still no," Sirius said at once. "The houses have absolutely nothing to do with that kind of stuff." Harry finally gave a real smile then, unable to put into words how much he appreciated them still backing him up after all of this. "Something that all five of us tend to have," Lily reminded Harry. Beaming down at him, Harry chuckled at her then, having noted quite a few times where his mum wasn't really as against his nosing around as he would have expected from a mother. She clearly had just as much of a curious streak as anyone else in the room. "You say that like it's a bad thing," James scoffed. "Personally, I have a theory," Remus told them all. "We all have the basis for the other three houses, but it's our bravery that we asked for a house that may tip the scales to set us into Gryffindor. I asked to go into Slytherin, though," Lily objected, noting the stunned look and shrugging without remorse. "What, after we had talked on the train, we decided we wanted to be in that house." "Well, I'm still partially right," Remus shrugged. "You asked to go into a house specifically. You just didn't get the house you asked for." "I didn't ask for a house," Harry corrected. "I just said the house I didn't want." "Which is the same basic principle," Sirius backed up Remus' theory. "You still asked, you just asked for what you didn't want." They all nodded, rather curious, but determined they really couldn't ever know. No one really knew how the sorting hat worked. "No way," James breathed, his eyes going wide as saucers, and a sudden burst of pride for his son making his chest nearly swell right out of him as he realized his very own boy had produced this legendary object. "Not the fabled sword of myth," Sirius murmured. "What are you guys talking about?" Harry asked curiously when it seemed they were all going to sit in stunned silence. Lily explained eagerly. "The four founders of Hogwarts all created objects of great power. They were said to go to those in their house at a time of need, but no one's been able to summon them since they got lost back in the medieval times after the founders passed. Gryffindor had a sword," Remus continued elaborating. "They say it was goblin-made, indestructible, and had been enchanted to go to those of great potential. There are rumors that this was King Arthur's sword." "Why would a wizard need a sword?" Harry probed curiously. James was nearly bouncing in his seat as he explained. "Back when magic was a common thing among muggles, muggles had the right to challenge wizards like anyone else. It was considered immoral for warlocks to use magic on muggles even then, unfair to be honest. So it was just as common for our kind to be practiced in sword skills, as well as magic. Also how wizards' duels came into existence," Sirius added on happily. Harry looked so intrigued on the matter, he knew he could have sat there for hours questioning all of this further. "What did the other founders have?" What kind of magical properties? But he recognized that it was getting very late, and his family dearly wanted to go to bed soon, so he held his tongue and thanked them for the history lesson. Sweet, Sirius whispered, all the more jealous of his pup. He would have been downright envious if the set of circumstances Harry had gotten it didn't involve him nearly dying. Thank Merlin, they all agreed fervently. None of them could even muster up a smile, all too afraid of this run of inept teachers Harry seemed to get stuck with. Sirius was already creating a new list of insults he could implore on the next sucker of this job. Ugh, Sirius snarled, just when things were supposed to be getting good. He can't do anything but complain, James huffed. He's just bitter he couldn't keep Dumbledore out of school. Darby, they all repeated in shock. Malfoy owned Darby. Sirius repeated like he'd just been clubbed over the head. I've been wondering about him, Remus nodded, and I kind of want to smack that little elf all over again. Harry was frowning at him, so he explained. One of the very first things you asked him was if this had anything to do with Voldemort. How much more involved could he be with a bit of Voldemort's soul hanging around the school? That's not even getting started on how the bloody hell that elf even knew that was what was going on this year. He hadn't really run out of steam, but Harry was still giving both he and Sirius beseeching looks. Somehow, Harry was still dearly defending this odd little elf, and their verbally berating him was making him uncomfortable. Sirius had been about to join in. In fact, his older vow that he still wished this stupid elf harm still stood 10 times over now that he knew who exactly his masters were. But they would rather cut off their right hand than make Harry upset like this, so they both bit back their tongues on the matter for now. They suspended him from his position, Lily spat. There's no law saying he can't come back up to the school any time for a visit. James suddenly frowned, not having realized that as he asked, So, are you saying Dumbledore isn't back as headmaster? Lily shrugged, saying, I've no idea, honestly. It hasn't said one way or another yet, and everyone there respects him enough they'd do what he said without the title. I'm just saying, Malfoy shouldn't be so upset. Yet. There you go then, Lily shrugged. He's back. Are you all happy now? Yes, the 4 boys said at once. Remus added on, How did Malfoy know, though? Ginny was taken at sundown, and it's still the dead of night. James pointed out, he probably heard from some source he has in the ministry that Dumbledore was back, and he went up to the school in a temper. Ha, Sirius muttered under his breath, though he was altogether sad that he had been right this time. The idea of Malfoy sinking so low as to threaten people just to get what he wanted was more than depressing to squash Sirius' little victory. Lily demanded under her breath. Harry and Ron did everything. James heard that and gave her a pointed look as he mouthed, Fox, at her. Lily rolled her eyes, thinking that Dumbledore's bird hardly counted as Dumbledore himself helping them. Then again, if Dumbledore never had Fox, then Harry might not have survived that, so she was just a bit grateful this time. Trying to see how he'd react to his old master's name, I guess. Remus murmured to himself. Sirius opened, then closed his mouth, biting back a comment about who on earth watches the house elves. There was just no sense in picking on Harry for something like that. It was slightly interesting why Malfoy brought Darby at all, as it was uncommon to bring your elf out of the house at all. And then Sirius' mouth really did flop open in horror. Glancing up, he saw the others were as well. Lily began unable to form that thought. It was just too awful to imagine. It was Malfoy, Harry howled in outrage. He gave that diary to Ginny. That day at Flourish and Blatz, when he gave Ginny back her transfiguration book, he slipped it in there. I knew it. I knew something foul had just happened, but I couldn't remember. He ran out of steam, but was still simmering below shouting levels as he glared vehemently at the book, mostly hating on himself right now. Last year he hadn't remembered that Quirrell was the one doing all of this. This year it was his fault his family had been sitting in the dark when he had remembered such crucial information like this. Hey, Lily said pointedly, tapping Harry on the temple gently until he turned her eyes back on her. We just talked about this, love. You cannot go blaming yourself every time you forget these things. What Malfoy did is the worst. The most awful thing I can ever imagine. She paused for a moment and turned away so Harry wouldn't see the downright murderous look on her face. Harry was stunned silent himself when he realized the last time he'd seen all of them look like this was because of the way the Dursleys treated him, But then Lily kept going. But we're going to handle it. I promise. We'll never let this type of thing happen to Ginny or anyone else, now that we know how to fix it. Harry nodded, feeling the tension roll right out of him once again. He seemed to have a hard time staying angry in this room. Sirius went on again, hoping dearly Dumbledore would pick up on this and send Malfoy to Azkaban for the rest of his no-good life. They all continued to mutter more foul things in that moment than many of them had said in their life. For someone to put this type of thing on a child, it was the worst thing any person could even think of doing. The act itself was seriously putting a strain on their wait until this is over to go and kill Malfoy now, because he wasn't even a child. He was a full-grown man right now, probably taking orders from Voldemort about doing other unspeakable things to people. The only thing really stopping them was Harry, who, despite how peeved he looked right along with them, was also giving the door covert looks, like if one single person made for it, he'd spring up and tell them all over again to wait it out. None of them still understood why, but they trusted him enough to believe him. The book really did slip from Sirius' grasp then, a look of the utmost outrage crossing his features as he said quietly, "Is he implying that Malfoy went and pulled this stunt just to get rid of that?" He looked so deranged in that moment. Harry had a very disquieting feeling that at one point Sirius really did scare him. That was ridiculous, though. Right. Of all the Sirius made to keep going, but James cut him off gently by saying, "We know Sirius. He's a horrible waste of a human being, but we still can't do anything about it, not yet anyways," he finished prominently. Sirius was still scowling and grumbling as he picked the book back up and made to continue, only Remus and Lily having noticed Harry watching him curiously. "I'm sure he was just imagining them all bloody year," Sirius couldn't help but growl, but this time he managed to restrain himself so that he could keep going. "That poor thing," Lily moaned. "I want to be able to do something for him." Sirius opened, then closed his mouth swiftly. Now that he knew this thing belonged to the Malfoys, something very odd was happening to him. He pitied it. While Darby had done a lot of awful things to Harry this year, he had also gone out of his way, against his master's views of the world even, to try and help Harry in his own twisted little way. Sirius had always thought ourselves were just the slaves of families, and the creatures would always just be the same horrible type that the family that owned them was. Yet here was Darby, a creature owned by the worst type of wizard who had tried to save Harry's life. It had officially skewed his whole opinion on the matter, but he also noted he had been silent too long in thinking about this. Since he didn't fully know where he stood on the matter anymore, he ignored the others' inquires and read loudly. Then they all groaned in hate. "So does this mean Malfoy's not even going to be punished for this?" James demanded of nothing. "I thought I hated the government before this," Sirius grumbled, "and my opinion of it just keeps going down." This time, no one could think of anything to say to the contrary. For someone to get away with attempted mass murder like this was repugnant to the extreme, not to mention the other injustices done this year against Hagrid. The Ministry was clearly just as skewed then as it was now, except then they couldn't blame Voldemort for the way they were acting. The people in power clearly didn't need to be there. "Anymore," Lily muttered. "How about we try punishing him for this crime now?" "I have the utmost faith you sure will," Remus tried to pacify her, which didn't really work that well since technically Malfoy hadn't really committed the crime yet. "What I want to know is how he got that," James growled. "I still don't understand how this thing even works. How did he make it?" Harry opened, then closed his mouth. He seemed to be having some odd feelings about those questions, but by now he knew better than to answer. It was something very important, though, something about how Malfoy wasn't the one who'd made this. It was gone, and he had nothing as always. "Try it," Sirius snapped. "Just try and curse Dumbledore, and I will die of happy laughter when he curses you into oblivion." James gave his best friend a haughty look for his choice of words, but Sirius didn't seem to notice. All five of them genuinely winced in sympathy that time, wishing that Darby would get some kind of reward for his efforts, bad as some of the results were. "Oh, this should be fun," James said weakly as he saw the bright-eyed look across Harry's face. "What did you think of?" Lily asked eagerly. Harry, however, pursed his lips and still wasn't able to hide his grin as he said, "No, I want you guys to see this one play out." "Oh, come on," Sirius whined. "We've been doing that all year, please." Harry hesitated before finally admitting the idea he had, causing everyone in the room to burst into righteous laughter. Praying that it would work, Sirius read eagerly. All five of them were leaning forward, more than eager to hear if this worked, and a little uneasy it hadn't outright said what Harry had been hoping would happen. Sirius cut himself off with a look of pure disgust at what he had just read, but ignored the comment for now. The lovely vision of all the curses he could send at Malfoy, soothing him enough to keep reading and find out what was going to happen to Darby. Meddlesome. Lily repeated curiously, I don't really see how it's a bad thing to be concerned with other people. I doubt that's the way he meant it, love, James grinned, and I don't care. Nothing a Death Eater could say about him could really sting too much, considering how little he have thought of their kind anyways. Yes, they all cried happily. Lily gave Sirius a look of genuine surprise as she asked, I'm surprised, Sirius. I thought you'd be outraged by Harry's trick. Please, he snorted. I can't blame Harry for what he did. Darby clearly isn't anything like my old elf, and the little guy deserved to be away from those Malfoys. I wouldn't wish that on any elf. Harry was beaming, looking genuinely happy Sirius had come around to this way of thinking, while the others gave him approving looks, happy to see he could put that kind of thing behind him. Remus couldn't help but furrow his brow in worry, thinking that technically Malfoy hadn't given Darby that sock. He had cast it off to the side, and Darby had caught it. If it was so easy, why on earth hadn't Darby ever just waltzed down to the laundry room and grabbed hold of any of the Malfoy's clothes and said, Hey, they tossed these down here and now Darby's free. He had always thought that you had to give the elf clothes with the express intent of freeing the elf, so did this count? Were they celebrating too early? Then again, he had heard of the idea that wizards magically do something to clothes so that elves can't just pick up any random bit of clothing and state I'm free. Darby had already just disobeyed a direct order from Malfoy and hadn't come to him. He dearly wanted to pry into this subject further, but admitted now wasn't the time or place, and he and Lily could sit around and have a real discussion about it later. He did what? The three without the book screeched in outrage. As if I didn't want him dead before, Sirius growled. Now he's actually moving to attack you. Harry, however, was suddenly grinning like a fool as he said, This is it. Darby protects me, I'm sure of it. This is why I forgave him for all that stuff he did. As sure as he was, though, he still begged Sirius to keep going so that he could know he was right and get the details of this. As outraged as they still were, they were all just as curious to hear about this. Ha! They all cheered, finding this small repentance for what he truly deserved. Hope it hurt, James grumbled. Lily was almost doing a little happy dance in place, giggling like a toddler herself at the mental image of a high and mighty wizard being taken down by the little elf he had been abusing. Oh, that was sweet justice if she ever heard it. Tail between his legs, Remus said, in a sing-song voice, indulging in that mental image happily. This almost makes up for the fact he didn't go to Azkaban for that stunt, James cackled, because this is just priceless. A fair trade, honestly, Sirius grinned. Then they all caught sight of Harry frowning curiously. Why, though, what could cause Harry to vaguely remember something about this promise? None of them had any more idea than Harry himself, so they didn't ask him about it when he didn't volunteer the question. I was wondering that too, Remus nodded, and it was really bothering me. Glad I asked then, Harry chuckled. That, James began before trailing off in disbelief, is the most inept clue ever, Sirius finished, looking torn between laughing or getting angry. He decided on laughter, not wanting to be mad at the elf just then since he was still so giddy for his actions just now. Remus and Lily were both shaking their heads indulgently, wondering how on earth anyone was supposed to understand that, but letting it go, realizing it hardly mattered now. Good luck, James said happily, rather curious about Darby and what happened to him. He very much hoped Harry would find out. Now there's some originality, Remus chuckled happily. Good of him to admit it, Lily nodded with approval. She would be upset, James grinned. What about owls and newts? Lily frowned. You can't just cancel those, you need honest grades. They still had to take those, Harry shrugged. But you know, they were delayed and I think given a bit of slack because of this year. Must be nice, Sirius laughed. I'm sure the whole of Hogwarts was just heartbroken, Remus snickered. All five of them burst into renewed laughter at this, unable to blame those teachers one bit. Sirius agreed, saying, Yeah, it might really have been fun to shove him in a classroom and see how he did teaching with no sense. Oh wait, he was already doing that. Hope you get someone even semi-decent next year. James sighed miserably, wishing this stupid taboo would leave the post already. Best news ever, Sirius cried happily. I'll agree with you on that one. The others all nodded. And I hope he stays that way, annoying little twat, James muttered, his good mood not even slightly dampened. Just glad there's no lasting effects on her, Lily agreed happily. The longer Sirius read, the more upset he was getting again. He had been thoroughly enjoying the end of Harry's year, but now he was going back to those dreaded Dursleys again, and none of them had any reason to think they'd be any happier seeing Harry this time around. Couldn't Harry just move in with Ron already? Knowing this wasn't going to happen, he just decided to get it over with. Sweet, James grinned. So we do at least get to find this out. Remus released a snort of mirth that went unheard in the following laughing fit. Oh, don't. Lily frowned at all of the boys who were laughing like idiots. It's not that funny. No, it's not, Sirius agreed, wiping a tear away. But as it's Percy the pompous jerk, it's hilarious. Lily rolled her eyes at these boys and snapped at Sirius that he needed to get over this and keep going. Sirius didn't look very eager. He had more than appreciated this little distraction from Harry having to go back, but read on anyways. Oh, Remus grinned. So I was right. He did know her personally, which is why he was particularly upset by her petrification. That really is adorable, James agreed without any malice. Clearly this girl could put up with Percy's attitude, which made her a pretty tolerable girl even without knowing her personally. If they're any kind of good brothers, they most certainly will, James disagreed full-heartedly. Makes me almost happy you don't have siblings, Lily snorted at him. I resent that, Sirius pouted, since James basically adopted me at some point. I'll back that up, James agreed. Remus and Lily exchanged amused looks, but didn't argue the point. There's the proper reaction, Sirius told Lily as if he was educating on a very important matter, to which Lily ignored him further. Now there's a good idea, Remus brightened at once. While they all looked rather happy at Harry's trying to keep in contact with his friends over the summer, it made a whole new kind of sadness come on all over again. They were all dreading having to hear any more horrid things about what those putrid muggles were going to do to Harry, and a phone call just wasn't going to cut it if they started trying to imprison Harry all over again. Then they consoled themselves that, at least if they did, Ron would show up and rescue him all over again. He'd just need to use something other than a flying car this time. They still smiled sadly at this, glad Harry was still trying his hardest to keep in contact with his friends. Sirius released a bark like laughter that held no real amusement that time. And he's not even kidding, Remus huffed in disgust. That's it, Sirius huffed, tossing the book away, not at all pleased it had ended with him going back to those muggles, but admitting it could have been worse. They all stretched as they made to get up, but then Harry suddenly asked, what did Riddle mean by werewolf cubs? Oh, that. Sirius gave an actual chuckle, albeit still too dark to be his normal tone, though this could be put to his hatred of werewolf ignorance. Just a bigot joke, I suppose. It's not possible for that to be a real thing. Werewolves aren't born, they're created. A werewolf has to bite another person for the contagion to occur. Besides, Remus butted in, trying his very hardest to keep the self-hatred out of his voice, my kind don't breed, so the term itself is kind of null and void. I hate it when you say it like that, James told him with a straight face. My kind? You're not a kind, Remus, you are a person. Remus rolled his eyes good-naturedly, but didn't correct him. He phrased it that way to generalize. He had long since given up the argument that he was no longer, technically, 100% human. James, Sirius, and Peter always gave him hell if he said anything to the contrary. What about Nick? Lily asked Harry curiously. Ever find out who fixed him? The Grey Lady, Harry answered. I heard Flitwick explaining that to another student. Yeah, apparently she went in there and did something to the potion, making it able for Nick to drink it. Some ghostly secret. Why it worked on a potion and wouldn't work on food or anything, I've no idea. The same reason we know nothing about the other weird things about ghosts, Sirius shrugged. They don't like sharing. James nodded, glad his son seemed able to find out all of these small little details that would have driven him crazy if he hadn't had a way to find out. And then he asked curiously, knowing by now his son had a habit of storing up questions, anything else you want to know before we get to bed? Yes, he answered quickly, catching Sirius' eye. Did something happen between you and the Ministry? He was recalling that odd moment when Hagrid was arrested, and his father's and Remus' comments. Sirius rolled his eyes in disgust as he explained. About a month ago, some Aurors came over to my place and tried to arrest me, on the grounds that some Muggles had been attacked in my area. That was it. They went by my name being in the area of Muggles and decided I was guilty enough they could just arrest me for it. Bloody wankers. He trailed off, muttering a few more words he'd spoken at the time. I showed up while this was happening, Remus butted in, at least cutting off his cursing, and managed to be his alibi, as if he even needed one. Guess I'm just lucky they accepted it at all and didn't arrest me just for being there. James was frowning at both of them, Sirius for the injustice done to him, and Remus for his snide comment, which could have been all too real. This injustice against both of his friends was one of the main reasons he was training to be an Auror. He was sick of the prejudices and injustice committed by people in power, and was hoping he could help make some kind of difference. And what about those messages on the wall? Lily asked curiously. Did they ever come down? Nope, Harry responded for sure this time. As far as I'm aware, they never could find a way to get them down. That's awful, Lily groaned, for that kind of reminder to be stuck there forever. Why wouldn't they go away? Harry asked. It depends on what was even used to put it up there, Sirius said. Some things are cursed so that they just can't be removed, some types of blood, for instance. Remus asked this time, so who explained about Ron's broken wand blowing up then? Oh yeah, Harry said in remembrance now. It was Dumbledore. He asked me, and ran for more details later on what happened to Lockhart. Then he explained something about how that much magic, being used through a broken wand, made the core explode or something. The improper use of the wand over such an extended period of time, we were lucky it hadn't happened sooner. Well, I still don't regret who it did happen to, James chuckled. They all mulled around for a bit longer, just talking and enjoying each other's company. It was only as Harry nearly cracked his jaw on the next yawn that they all decided it was high time they go to bed. As Remus began climbing the stairs, he made some vague comment to Sirius about how next year, Harry just had to have a nice, peaceful year. This year might have ended on a semi-happy note, but they still felt like the books were watching them, laughing at their delusion that Harry might get 1 year of peace. Finally. I am so happy to have been able to complete 2 books in a row now. I'm bouncing around my room even as I type this. Okay, I'm calmer now. Next is the book I know you've all been waiting for, and trust me, I've been just as anxious to start. All kinds of ideas for their reactions have been buzzing around since the first book, so I can guarantee the next book is going to be churning out fast. Glad you're all still enjoying this series as much as I am. P.S. If there were any random questions, or things I didn't explain, or just something you'd like to hear me try and explain, let me know and I'll work it into the story. Thoughts on Chamber of Secrets. This book successfully takes what happened in the first book and keeps building on it. This mystery is even better than the last one, and with only 3 new places Harry visits, the book feels even more flowing and interactive, like J.K. took her time to delve into and give even more unbelievable detail to the world she'd created. The mystery is beautiful, with plenty of twists you won't see until the very end, and so well set up you don't even see it coming. I know this is a lot of people's least favorite book, but I can't really figure out why, as there are far more humors and good moments in this one than another book I'll get to later. Third favorite of the series, 1010, could not ask for a better follow-up. Another random thing of note that isn't exactly important, but still drives me crazy to this day. Why on earth did that count as Darby being free? This exact set of circumstances had never happened before, where one of the Malfoys just happened to throw an article of clothing away, and Darby was in the room and didn't catch it, and that didn't count. If any of you have any suggestions, I'd love to hear them. My favorite solution, offered up by Narutofan 8762, who basically said what every plot hole in this series deserves, because magic.